Recording in progress. on, Tammy?
Mayor, just give me one sec.
Okay.
We're good for you? Yep. We're ready, Mayor.
Thanks. I would like to welcome Captain Barstow, who will lead us in tonight's invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we thank you for the abundance of blessings and gifts that you have bestowed upon this community, its residents, and those who work diligently to ensure its success. We are truly fortunate for all that you have entrusted to us, and we pray that our work and efforts glorify you in all that we do. We ask that you be present this evening, and that you give all here tonight a sense of peace and clarity, as well as a willingness to work collaboratively together for the best interests of Milton. And finally, God, continue to watch over our community and all who serve it, and help us to listen for your insight and guidance in all that we undertake. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Good evening. I would like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, May 2nd, 2022 to order. The city strongly recommends that you review tonight's agenda carefully, and if you wish to speak on any item on the agenda, then please bring your comment cards to the clerk as soon as possible. While the Milton rules allow a speaker to turn in their comment card up until the clerk calls the agenda item, once the agenda item is called, no more comment cards can be accepted. Will the city clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call roll for the May 2nd, 2022 regular meeting. I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Those attending the meeting who would like to make a public comment who are required to complete a public comment card prior to speaking on the item. Your comment card must be presented to me, the city clerk, prior to the agenda item being called. All speakers, please identify yourself by name, address, and organization before beginning your comment. If you are representing an organization, an affidavit is required stating you have the authority to speak on behalf of that organization. Please review tonight's agenda, and if you would like to make a comment, please bring your comment card to me now. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited. Please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, or outbursts with any person speaking. Anyone in violation will be asked to leave. As I call roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Peyton Jamison.
Here.
Councilmember Andrea Veerhoff.
Here.
Councilmember Paul Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Juliette Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Carol Cookerly.
Here.
And Councilmember Jan Jacobus.
Here.
And Mayor, for the record, Councilman Rick Morrig is on his way. He's running a few minutes late.
Thank you.
Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the city clerk please stay on the next item?
Mayor, that next item is approval of the meeting agenda, agenda item number 22150.
Okay. Council, I would like to make the following changes. I would like to move the proclamation, which is under reports and presentations. I'd like to move that up to the first reports and presentations, so make that 7A. And then immediately after that, move the new business item, agenda item number 22-152, immediately after that proclamation. Can I open up for a motion if y'all are okay with that?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we amend the agenda as suggested.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Moore and a second from Councilmember Jacobus. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No? All right. So with that said, we will move on to general public comment.
Mayor, we do have a general public
Okay.
comment.
So the next item is general public comment. Public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the mayor and the city council and to provide input and opinions on any matter that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city clerk prior to the agenda item being called. Please remember that this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. You will have 5 minutes for remarks. The city encourages you to review the agenda, and if you wish to speak, to bring your comment cards to the city clerk right now. So, city clerk, please call the first item, or
Thank
first
you,
card.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to invite Miss Allison Eckhart to the podium, please.
okay if my buyer comes up as well? He's part of this. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Allison Eckhart. My address is 4600 Roswell Road, Sandy Springs, Georgia, 30342. Anything else I need to say first?
Nope, that's good.
Hi, guys. I am here in representation of my family's land. I'm also a realtor representing the sale of that land to Mr. Burt Blackman. We are under contract currently. This is a land parcel that's been in my family for many years. I was born in the city of Milton, so just wanted to address that. 1070 Lackey Road is the land parcel. There is also a residence that is addressed. We are not referring to that tonight. What we are asking the city council for is a little bit of help. We have been trying to gain access to the rear of this property for Mr. Blackman to have a single residence building site. There is a creek with many different branches that runs across this parcel. This is located in between Lackey Road and the rear where we are trying to have the build site. We have gone to every adjoining piece of property trying to gain access in another way rather than disturb the wetlands on this property. We have found that the most reasonable point of access, we believe, is going to be through the Ardenwood development that is coming in on the rear of Ebenezer Road. I believe you all are familiar with this development, as I think plans have been pushed all the way through. So what we are asking for is a little push to Brightwater Homes from the city council to allow Mr. Blackman access. He is willing to pay for any change fees to their plans, as well as the use of that access, so that we might gain entry to the rear of our property for him. Brightwater, we have tried to reach out to them. They have given us pushback. And rather than disturb the wetlands on this property, we really feel this would be the best use of the land. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'd also,
Just take your name and address.
Burt Blackburn, 121 Old Heritage Way, Woodstock, Georgia. And I grew up down the road as well. But there is old Ebenezer Road, used to go right through the property. And the roadbed for the road is still there. The important thing to point out is that the developer doesn't lose any lots. So it doesn't have an effect on the development. If anything, it might drive down a little bit of their cost. And we found inside, I guess, the city ordinance, there was a ordinance that we emailed to y'all, 2392, that just we felt like allowed for a situation like this where it could be in the best interest of the city or the land to allow access through another property owner's property. So that was where we felt like that since there's a roadbed already in, there was access to this property originally. It just made more sense, if it's not going to take away from the development, to just come in off of a cul-de-sac. That's it.
Yeah, it's the roadbed runs with the lay of the land. I think it would be a great place for Mr. Blackman to already put his driveway. It just makes sense. It would be the least disturbance of the land to use this old roadbed and old easement. And one other point I would just like to make, I did send a copy of a letter I have from my grandfather, who is the owner of this land parcel, stating that he was not properly notified of the development of Ardenwood. He's a resident of Florida. There was some kind of record stating that a letter was sent. He never received that letter. So I've given Miss Tammy a copy of this just to forward to all of y'all, showing that he officially did not receive notice. And he's pretty upset because that development does affect the value of our land. There is 2 lots that back directly up to the rear property line. So he cannot be here. He's elderly. Otherwise, he would be here this evening. So I am representing him in that matter. So
I guess finally, if y'all would like to see the old Ebenezer Road as well as the
Yes.
development plat, I've got it, and kind of where the driveway would come in.
If you could give that to our city manager over there, we'll get it after the
Okay.
meetings. Public comment, we really don't go back and forth on.
Sure.
But we'll discuss with our legal counsel.
Is there any questions, though,
We
from
don't-
anyone?
On
regarding-
public comment, we don't.
Oh,
do
okay,
that.
I
Sorry
understand.
about that.
No worries. Thank you for
Yep, thank
listening.
you.
Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate it. All right, Tammy, will you move on to consent agenda? Will the city clerk please sound the items?
Mayor, that item is approval of the April 25th, 2022 regular city council meeting minutes, agenda item number 22151. Mayor?
Okay, I'd like to open up for a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we approve agenda item number 22-151.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Cookerly and a second from Councilmember Moore to approve the consent agenda as read. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. So we will move on to reports and presentations, and we move the proclamation first.
Mayor, and that is the proclamation recognizing World Press Freedom Day. Mayor?
Great, thank you. We have Rohan Mova in the audience today. He emailed me. He's a junior at Milton High School on this proclamation recognizing World Press Freedom Day, and I'm here to read it. So whereas high schools in and around Milton boast excellent award-winning journalism programs that are valuable to those involved and those they serve, and whereas through these programs, local students play vital roles in reporting, analyzing, and sharing important news about their communities, and whereas research shows that students who participate in scholastic journalism curriculums excel above the norm in standardized tests, become better writers, and feel empowered to tell important stories. And whereas the ability to understand complex stories, explore unique perspectives, dive into pressing issues, and clearly, artfully, and powerfully relate stories will serve these young journalists well for years to come. And whereas the free press and opportunity to share news about what is happening in communities are valuable, foundational elements of a democracy. And whereas, in recognition of this, the United Nations General Assembly has declared May 3rd as World Press Freedom Day. Now, therefore, we, the mayor and the city council of the city of Milton, recognize World Press Freedom Day as well as the value and excellence of student journalism within our community. It's given under our hand and seal of the city of Milton, Georgia on the 2nd day of May 2022. And if Rohan, if you want to come on up, that'd be good. Come down, take a picture.
Were two other people that you needed? Okay. All right, thank you.
I think everybody got one.
You ready, Tammy?
I
I
am.
know we switched things around. So we will move on to new business. If you could please call that item.
Mayor, that item is approval of an agreement between the City of Milton and White Columns Community Association for installation of 4 radar feedback signs. It's agenda item number 22152. Miss Sarah Leaders. She does it, and then we do.
Skipped over down to Sweden.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is an agreement that we're proposing between the city and White Columns related to a right of entry, an indemnity, a maintenance, and a cost share agreement for radar feedback signs in the neighborhood. I wanted to start with quickly going over the city's role in our traffic calming program. First thing we do is determine the eligibility for city funds. In our ordinance, that's established as if more than 50% of the vehicles identified with traffic counts are going over the posted speed limit. That's one of the eligibility requirements for traffic calming funding. We look at applications and process them on a first-come, first-served basis, and those can be prioritized if needed based on available funding in the traffic calming program. We look and develop and discuss concepts with the applicant, which is usually the HOA of a neighborhood. We approve the plans for the final measures, determine base cost using city procurement procedures, and then we either bid and construct or permit the installations. This slide shows some of the historic traffic calming measures that have been installed. The first category is where there was the city cost sharing for those measures, and they were installed by the city. It's a 50-50 cost share on what we consider a basic measure. So that's a list of the neighborhoods and the types of devices under the first bullet. The next bullet is some neighborhoods that have both funded and installed the measures with their own funds, and those simply required a right-of-way permit to install those, and then an indemnity and maintenance agreement that was recorded between the city and the HOA. And so we've had 2 examples of neighborhoods that have gone that route. And then what we're talking about tonight is the proposed White Columns agreement, which is somewhat of a combination of these. It would be a city cost share based on the bid amount for a basic sign, but the HOA would pay for any upgrades. They would install, indemnify, and maintain the measures. And these, again, are related to 4 radar feedback signs. These are the components of the agreement, and I'll go through each one of these. First of all, the right of entry. So we issue a right-of-way encroachment permit, which actually allows the installation of the signs. And this is something that can be done with or without the agreement. Our standard right-of-way permit spells out these conditions that allows the work and installation in the right-of-way. It covers general safety requirements, utility coordination, and restoring any damages. So the right-of-way encroachment permit has been issued for these signs. Like I said, it can run separate than the agreement. The right of entry terms in the agreement are related to the future maintenance and access to enter the right-of-way to, again, keep up with the signs and maintain them. These bullets cover the indemnification and maintenance components of the agreement. So first of all, it covers that the private improvements will be installed in the city right-of-way and that the city's indemnified and held harmless. Related to public improvements, if there's any damage to underground city infrastructure or curb, anything to that effect, sidewalk, it would cover the repair and replacement of those public improvements. It includes a maintenance obligation. Again, the HOA would maintain these signs and be given access to the right-of-way to enter to maintain them. And the duration is set to that it will remain in full force until the private improvements are removed. So a little bit of information about the signs. The picture on the top right is our standard, what we're calling our base radar sign. We've recently installed, I believe, 10 of these throughout the city. So that's where we got the cost for the base sign. And then the sign more in the middle is the example of what's being proposed in White Columns. So this shows the cost that was bid as we purchased those 10 signs. And then the eligible 50% of this base installation comes to a total for the 4 signs of $6,853. There's also a data sharing component of the agreement that allows within 30 days notice that the HOA would make any speed or date time information collected by the sign available to the city. This just shows that the agreement is governed by these laws that spell out the information on signage as well as our code related to traffic calming. And so in conclusion, the future considerations, based on the ordinance, the White Columns HOA does comply with section 48263A, which again, like I said at the beginning, requires that half of the vehicles are exceeding the speed limit to qualify for funding under the traffic calming program. Legal has performed a review of the covenants and has determined that the HOA complies with section 48258A of the code, that they may act on behalf of the neighborhood and that installation may proceed without a petition of all the homeowners. And lastly, that they could consider future traffic calming in the future. This agreement is only related to the radar signs. They could choose to go the route of a bid and installation by the city. So if they were considering speed tables, that could be something that the city would bid and get cost on. And then there could be a similar agreement if there was another HOA proposed installation of traffic calming. That's the presentation.
Thank you. Before we ask questions, is y'all okay with public comment now? Okay.
Mayor, thank you. We do have public comment, and I'll have a section that I'll read into they're here in attendance, but they would like their comments read. So I'll first start with support, then opposition, and then I have public comment who will come to the podium and the same support and then opposition. Our first commenter is Mel Levine at 890 Hampton Bluff Drive, Milton, and that's wants to state that he is in support of this item. Our next is Mary LaVille. She is in opposition. She's at 15400 White Columns Drive. I do not think the board represented the neighborhood as a whole by proper communication and resolution. It does not complement our investment as homeowners, and nobody wants to see anyone hurt, but I do not think the ridiculous scale of speed monitor is going to ensure that either. Peter Gillian at 15420, Guyan, I believe is his last name, 15420 White Columns Drive. In opposition, signs do not fit well with the neighborhood. Other signs should be removed. Jim Howard at 420 Highlands Manor is in opposition. White Column speed signs are not in keeping with the standards of the neighborhood. All posted signs are black, not polished steel, and should be removed. They are an eyesore and should not have been installed in the first place. Denise Upton is in opposition. These large, permanent, obtrusive speed meters are, number one, not wanted by every neighbor I've spoken to. Number two, were installed without informing or getting consent of the affected homeowners. 2 of the 4 are between houses. And number 3, are not in keeping with the neighborhood's aesthetics. Amy Meza, I believe is the last name, 15305 White Columns Drive, in opposition. Question data collected speeding beyond club entrance and placement of signs and non-decorative appearance are the same as used on highways observed on I-85 South and Georgia's 316. Let me just make sure. On White Columns Drive, in active discussion with longtime residents who reside around and beyond fourth sign in rear section and sound placement of all unnecessary, especially based on large price tag without homeowner vote, appearance, and blessing and belief of necessity. And the final one that I'll read is from Kelly Mascalusa at 15410 White Columns Drive, in opposition. We have lived in White Columns since 2012, and we are extremely upset that White Columns HOA has chosen to add these bulky, unsightly speeding signs in our neighborhood, in particular in immediate sight from the front of our home. I would like to call Tony Palazza to the podium, please.
Good evening. City Council, I know many of you, some I haven't met. Appreciate you having me here today. I'm here to speak on behalf of the White Columns Community Association. One, I want to thank everyone here for everything you've done for the city, and very, very appreciative of...
Real quick, Tony, can you say your address, please?
Oh, sorry. 1505 Muirfield Cove, Milton, 20004. So I'm very appreciative of everything the city council has done. I'm convinced the city of Milton wouldn't be where it is today without a lot of the difficult decisions that happen here. So very, very grateful for everybody's service. I shot an email over to the city council today. The Board of White Columns Community Association has a fiduciary duty, and we wanted to focus on some very important things. And one of the most important things to us is safety. And I think as the city has focused on relative to speeding and safety, we wanted to focus on that because that's what we were told was a very, very important issue within the neighborhood, and it's something that we strongly believe in. So what we have in White Columns is 4 separate neighborhoods. For those of you who don't know, 434 houses. There's 2 neighborhoods with approximately 40 homes. The golf section, which is what we're here today, is 220 houses. And gated White Columns, about 130. So we're here really addressing the golf section of White Columns. So there's been a significant speeding problem in White Columns for a very long time. I would argue it's one of the most sped-on residential streets in the city of Milton. So I think the first question the council member may ask themselves is why that is. And it's my opinion that's driven by the fact that there's a very large for-profit business in the center of the neighborhood that serves a significant number of people, which is the Club Corp White Columns Golf Club. Has over 1,000 members. Typical day, there's a significant amount of coming and going from the club. So that alone makes the White Column situation unique to any other neighborhood within Milton. The other things that have happened over a very long period of time is speeding is sort of addressed within the community, but nothing ever has really seemed to happen. And so what we decided as an association and as a board was safety of children, safety of residents, addressing an issue that seems to be getting worse. And based on the data the city provided has gotten significantly worse. We wanted to take steps to address it. And so I think I heard Sarah say that neighborhoods qualify for financial support if 50% or more of the readings in a speed study are speeding. Well, the good news in White Column, the number is 98%. So White Columns Drive eastbound off of Freemanville Road, 98% of the readings in the last speed study exceeded the speed limit. The 85th percentile speed, which for those that aren't traffic experts, which I'm not, I had to figure out what that meant, means 15% of the readings are above that number. The other thing the 85th percentile speed is where a city normally sets a speed limit. So for White Columns, depending on which traffic measure you look at, the numbers are alarming. 85th percentile, White Columns Drive westbound, so going to the clubs, 44 miles an hour. So if you think about that for a second, 44 miles an hour, 85th percentile, that means 15% of the readings on the day they did this speed study were higher than 44 miles an hour, which is extremely scary. Second, something that was very eye-opening to me is why do we want to reduce speeds in a neighborhood? Safety, all these large different things we can focus on, but something that came to mind is infant.
Minute.
I'm sorry?
1 minute remains.
Okay, thank you. Is child fatalities. So there's a ton of research available online about the speed at which a youth or child is struck by a car and their probability of surviving. So those numbers are fairly dramatic and change very quickly with the speed at which the car is traveling. So under 25 miles an hour, child has 5% chance of dying. Over 35 miles an hour, that probability goes to 15. And once you get into the mid 40s, it's over 50%. So our main focus as a neighborhood, as a board, is to try to bring down these speeds, which are extremely alarming. And this was the first step, hopefully in many, in order to do that. So I'm here to answer any questions the council may have, and I'm just very grateful and appreciative for your time and the thought you put into this matter.
All right, thank you. Tammy, please call the next speaker.
Mayor, I'd like to invite Dana Dudley to the podium, please. Change it. Mike Upton, would you like to come to the podium, please?
Mike Upton, 15370 White Columns Drive, Milton, Georgia. Just a little bit of background. I'm not going to argue about the cost. It works out to be $30 per family, which is no big deal, even if you don't do it. If you do, appreciate it, but it's not going to make or break anybody. Just want to give you a little bit of background. I was on the board for 7.5 years, 6.5 I was president. We have always had a speeding problem. Number one, our speed limits are 25 miles an hour. I defy you to find any place in Atlanta where people generally drive 25 miles an hour or less. As a matter of fact, your own police departments informed me on more than one occasion that they won't even cite anybody unless they're doing over 35. Okay? They're your streets, they're your speed limit. Occasionally, but seldom, see police officers out there. As a matter of fact, the biggest offenders, I live on White Columns now, I have for 21 years. The biggest offenders by far are the FedEx trucks, UPS, and most importantly, the school buses. They're the worst speeders out there. I think the signs are hideous. I don't think they fit our neighborhood. I would take exception to where they're placed. Our biggest, and we went through this twice, by the way. We did surveys and all that stuff. Nobody likes any of the measures, okay? What I was going to say, I lost my train of thought. Oh, our biggest problem from my perspective is the club that was referenced is White Columns Country Club. It is no secret. Okay, your police department knows where it is. I think. When you exit the club to go back out on the Freemanville Road, you're facing the back of the signs. All right. Our biggest safety problem is people leaving the club about half drunk. Okay. You could probably make your monthly budget by just staking it out on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. Plus, when the pool opens, people are out there drinking all day long. Okay. So I personally am all for safety. We've tried it before. Education doesn't work. It's a joke. A lot of people in and out of that community, lawn services, PS drivers, what have you. Everybody seems to use a different pest control service. I said the school buses are the worst offender. So we tried that more than once. We debated endlessly about what we could do. The most effective and cost-effective approach is speed bumps. Sarah calls them something different, but they're speed bumps. They work. Everybody hates them. My question, I like clarification on, is when I was on the board, it's my understanding that communities that have mandatory HOAs, the board has the ultimate authority, can do whatever it wants to from a traffic calming standpoint, as long as it's, in accordance with city rules, whatever. It's not mandatory. 67% of the affected homeowners need to approve it. I'd like to know what the current rule is, because I'm not sure 67% of the homeowners in the golf community, based on my prior experience, I haven't seen any recent surveys. I wasn't surveyed personally, neither was my wife. I just like to kind of know what the rules are going forward. They're your ordinances. So the question is, do homeowners have any input other than elect board members who serve for 2 years? That's my question. This is not a new issue. Everybody's for safety. The community, I think, started selling houses, Paul, you might remember, like 1993 or something like that. We've never had an accident. Doesn't mean anything. I have homeowners insurance on my home. I've never had a fire. But it's not like this has gotten dramatically worse. I moved into White Columns. I realized in two or 3 weeks that people don't drive 25 miles an hour. It's also a hilly community. It's not easy always to stay under 25. So that's I just want to make sure you understand it's not a new deal. And I'd like to hear what the rules are for putting this stuff in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dana Dudley, I invite you to the podium.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dana Williams Dudley. I live at 590 Glenhampton Drive, Milton, 30004. I've lived in the golf section of White Columns for 14 years. I served on the White Columns Board of Directors from 2014 through 2020, and also served as president from mid-2016 to August of 2020. Since my time on the board and prior to this time, traffic calming measures have been discussed with the City of Milton. I'm grateful for the time that many city representatives have spent with us over the years to discuss the speeding in White Columns, and also to address possible measures that could be taken. And Sarah, thank you so much for your time over the years. There were 2 traffic studies conducted during my time on the board, in 2016 and again in 2019. Based on the results of the 2016 study, in August of 2017, I submitted an application for the community to be considered for the city's traffic calming program. We were approved to participate. At the time, and as recently as 2019, we discussed the addition of speed tables and the possible placement of additional stop signs if warranted. The city developed aerial maps which showed potential locations of speed tables. In response to a question from the city about whether the Board of Directors has authority to make decisions on behalf of the members of the association, in February of 2019, I sent the White Columns governing documents over to the city to show that the board did in fact have authority. Despite alerting White Columns residents about plans via hard copy letters of annual reports and email messages, many residents still complained that they were unaware of the proposed traffic calming options. Because of residents' concerns raised to the city and to the board, in March 2019, we were told by the city that we may want to proceed with a vote to ensure that there was 67% approval from impacted residents. At the time, the city did not want to proceed because of perceived unrest within the community. In a White Columns meeting held in April of 2019, residents were very outspoken and demanded that they had the right to vote on what they considered to be extreme measures that would alter the appearance of the neighborhood and potentially adversely impact home values. Based upon the extent of the complaints and past outcome of voting on the same issue, the board opted not to proceed with the vote because we felt that it would not pass at that time. Instead, we continued with messaging about adhering to posted speed limits throughout the community. The boards of directors in White Columns have always had the same level of authority regarding decision-making on behalf of the residents. And while this is a mandatory HOA, based on prior communications and guidance from the city, even in instances where HOA boards of directors may act on behalf of residents, the city also has a policy of taking into account wide community support for these types of projects. In their February 18, 2020 minutes, under the category of ad hoc speeding committee, the current board of directors included the following excerpt.
1 minute.
Mr. Barnes reported that the ad hoc speeding committee was successful in conducting meetings with the city of Milton about speeding remediation measures in the golf section, and that all available initiatives were being discussed with the committee members and golf residents at large. Please be aware that to date, these measures have not been presented to golf residents at large. While there's information about the proposed radar signs and a couple of email communications and in documents posted to our property management company's website, there have been no meetings to discuss options with residents. I'm aware that the The current board conducted 2 opinion surveys, but the results have not been presented to residents either. In fact, I've spoken with residents who've never received a hard copy. I am in favor of traffic calming, but please, I ask that you listen to the community members and seek their opinion about this subject. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Karen Kemper to the podium, please.
Good evening. My name is Karen Kemper, and I have lived at 15315 White Columns Drive in Milton, Georgia for 21 years. I would like to express my concerns related to the proposed reimbursement of costs for the 4 radar signs that the HOA already purchased and installed. It is my understanding that the city told prior HOA boards that they would need approval by 67% of the residents to indicate wide community support. There has never been a community vote on traffic calming solutions. This past December, the HOA sent a letter to the city which requested a meeting with the city and White Columns residents where neighbors' concerns could be heard and solutions presented to improve traffic conditions in our neighborhood. When this meeting was requested, the HOA had already purchased 4 radar signs without gaining neighborhood consensus. The HOA then installed these signs without any neighborhood consensus and without a town hall meeting between residents and the city. The HOA purchased these 4 signs with the original planned location for the 4th sign on Trayburn Manor View based on traffic studies. The 4th sign has actually been installed in front of my house. This is approximately 3/4 of a mile in the back of the neighborhood and about 1/4 of a mile past the club entrance. Traffic for only 28 homes passes this traffic calming sign. I'm not aware of any notification by the HOA to the community about this change in placement prior to the initial installation on March 17th. On March 18th, I spoke with Roddy Motes of the Public Works Department because the installer did not have the permit with them. During our conversation, he mentioned that White Column streets only accommodated 3 radar signs, but since the HOA already had purchased 4, this 12-foot high unnecessary radar sign with a solar panel on top wound up in a default location in front of our house. Again, the community was not made aware of the location of this extra sign until installation began. Is the city aware that this 4th sign was placed on the far side of the sidewalk instead of in the right-of-way strip like the other 3 signs? For whatever reason, this sign is the only radar sign that I have ever seen on a city street that is on the far side of the sidewalk. Does setting the sign so far from the curb create a potential safety hazard for drivers and families? Not only is this particular sign approximately 8.5 feet from the curb, it is one of 2 signs in White Columns placed on the left-hand side of this street. This sign in front of our house draws the driver's eyes away from the road to the left, past any oncoming traffic, then an additional 8.5 feet past the curb, past the sidewalk, and any walkers, runners, etc., and then up 12 feet, all while navigating a curve. I have not seen any traffic calming signs around Milton or anywhere else that are placed on the left-hand side of the street, let alone in this manner. Does placing the sign on the left-hand side of a city street plus another 8.5 feet past the curb create a potential safety hazard for drivers and their families? It is my understanding that the city ordinance section 48-237 states that traffic calming devices can only be supported on residential streets with a minimum average daily traffic count of 400.
1 minute.
A 2016 traffic study indicates an average daily count of 277 vehicles in a location on White Columns Drive, past the club, and before the intersection of Trayburn Manor Drive, which was shown on the slide presented by Ms. Leaders. The fourth sign is located behind this intersection where there is presumably even less traffic. An updated traffic study in 2019 does not even appear to address this location. The radar sign on Trayburn Manor View is near a 2019 traffic study location that had an average daily count of 396, which barely meets criteria established by the city. Lastly, is the city aware that none of the 4 radar signs are in locations which address and alert drivers leaving the club along White Columns Drive where there is substantially more traffic? I am in favor of traffic calming in White Columns, but any proposed plans need community-wide support. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Courtney Hensley to the podium, please.
Good evening. My name is Courtney Hensley, and I live at 15340 White Columns Drive. I have been a resident of White Columns for 22 years, maybe longer than most people in this room. And the interesting thing is, in the 22 years, I've never been here before. I've never felt like the need to be here, but I am here tonight. So I hope that you can see that and the support behind me, that there is a reason that we are all here. For 20 years, the HOA board did an amazing job. There were never any issues. It's a job that many people don't get a lot of praise for, but they did a great job because nobody was unsettled by it. When the current board took over in 2020, there's been a lot of unrest. I am not against traffic calming measures. The police presence, for example, has been wonderful, and from what I've heard, has made a very big impact and has been very successful in the neighborhood. However, I do oppose the current speed signs and any further measures without community-wide awareness. There also needs to be full disclosure of information along with resident approval. The recent speed signs look like they belong in an industrial zone. Our beautiful community is becoming an eyesore. Even if the current HOA is allowed to make these types of decisions without input, why would they? Aren't they supposed to be stewards of the majority? I'm curious how an HOA board would not want to fully hear all sides from all residents. The signs are 12 feet tall, twice as large as those on Freemanville. 2 are on the opposite side of the road, and 1 is placed at the back of the neighborhood toward a dead end with only 28 homes behind it. Additionally, not one of the 4 signs installed addresses the biggest speeding issue in our community, which are drivers leaving the club towards Freemanville Road. And while the signs have a data share component, it won't necessarily be valid. There are teens trying to beat their daily numbers, as I've already heard this is happening, which I believe why police presence is so important. The current board did not engage the community in a true conversation about this subject. The only in-person meeting the HOA has allowed since they took over was an 11/17/1921 or 2021 annual meeting. In that meeting, speeding was discussed, and it was stated that more information would be gathered and that residents would be kept informed before any decisions were made. That didn't happen. There was no meeting to discuss options. There was obviously no vote. There was nothing. During the most recent HOA call-in board meeting, which for the record, they only allow residents on listen-only mode, a member of the board stated that they received an approximate 30% response rate on a recent survey, and I use that very loosely. If you divide that total by the number of homes in all 4 sections, which is 434, that is 134 responses from all of White Columns. So if you do average math, it's a very small percentage from the golf section who answered, and of that small number, an even smaller number who stated that traffic was the #1 issue. No results were provided or shared with residents. I've heard from many neighbors who never even received a survey. How can something so casually distributed be used for making such important decisions on behalf of 227 golf section residents? Our community needs to be brought together to discuss what, if any, options are being considered, and proper, fair decisions need to be taking place before anything is done. Even if a vote isn't required, it's the right thing to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Suzanne Gaines to the podium, please.
Good evening. I am Suzanne Gaines, and I live at 540 Trayburn View, Milton, Georgia, 3004. I am a resident of White Columns Golf. I have lived here for 9 years. We bought our home in White Columns for its bucolic setting. I now feel that our neighborhood has an industrial edge to it with the newly installed speed signs. I understand the concern to address speeding in our neighborhood. However, I disagree with the process the HOA board decided to follow through with. We now have 4 12-foot silver poles with flashing lights and solar panels installed. This decision was from results of a survey that less than 30% of the residents of 434 homes completed, showing speed as a concern. We were told at the November 2021 homeowners meeting that a committee would be formed to address the speeding in the neighborhood. In February 18, 2022, the HO meeting showed that Mr. Barnes reported that the ad hoc speeding committee was successfully conducting meetings with the city of Milton about speeding remediation measures in the golf section, and that all available initiatives were being discussed with the committee members and golf residents at large. It never was done. As a golf resident, I have never been notified of the initiatives that the committee was discussing. We are all here as concerned homeowners. I'm asking the city to allow the residents to have a voice in the measures that are being taken to keep our neighborhood safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final comment, I would like to invite David LaVille to the podium, please.
Thank you. David Lavelle, 15400 White Columns Drive. We've lived there for 12 years now. I'll try not to be repetitive. I'm here in opposition of the enormous signs. I feel like this has been an autocratic decision made by a homeowners association without any input from the people who live in the golf community. I remind all of you that there are 4 White Columns communities, and many of the board members live outside of the golf community, so it may not affect them for these signs to be in our section. When the signs went up, I sent an email out to the homeowners association board and asked some questions. And I'd just like to read some of the responses to the questions because I don't want to misspeak. So in response to a question, the association's purchase of the new radar-controlled signs were included in community-wide emails in September, on September 6th, October 10th, and December 21st of 2021, as well as in the February 15th, 2022 community-wide email. So that speaks to the purchase of the signs. Later, they comment, in addition, while individual votes on every matter facing the association cannot, as a practical matter, be taken by every resident, we do want to make sure we are both communicating and listening well, which obviously that didn't happen. In order to gauge community opinion, we did circulate a resident survey as part of our February 15th, 2022 community email. So in other words, they surveyed us after repeatedly telling us that they'd already purchased the equipment. Among golf residents, 50% said speeding and road safety is extremely or very important. Another 28% said the issue is somewhat important. In the same survey, radar-controlled speed signs ranked 3rd behind increased community education and increased speed controls by Milton Police. So in other words, it was the 3rd recognized priority to the board. However, we purchased the signs. So it just feels like this decision's been made without any consideration for those who are impacted the most by it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, that concludes public comment on
Okay.
this item.
Well, I will close public comment and open up for council questions and discussion. Ken, I'll have one question, or I have two questions really quick. One is, what is the legal authority that the HOA has now, and what exactly are they requesting?
Well, let me start from the beginning. First of all, we're talking about City of Milton right away. So we have the authority to set up systems in place that will help stakeholders and constituents approach the city to ask for certain things to do within our right of way. Remember, so think of like right of way abandonment, et cetera. We have capabilities for private groups, et cetera, to come and make these requests to us, not unlike what we're seeing here. We have an ordinance and we have an attendant policy. The ordinance and the policy both contemplate that in situations where you have a mandatory HOA that is otherwise tasked to act on behalf of the HOA eventualities, they have the right to do that and to bypass the petition requirement. And so our office did in fact look at the covenants as well as what White Columns HOA had the authority to do, and concurred that they do in fact have the authority under our policy and our code to make this request. That is not binding on the City of Milton. It is a part of our process that we put in place to bring these issues to you. But you are confronted now with both an encroachment permit or encroachment onto city right-of-way, as well as an agreement implicating cost share. Those are discretionary. So you certainly have the right to do this because you've put in place a system that allows it to get to this point. And it is my belief that everyone has acted appropriately from a legal standpoint. That's why it's in front of you. If they had not done things appropriately, it would never have gotten here. But here it is. So within the confines of that, the contract itself is appropriate. I believe it was drafted by my office. I believe it is consistent with the ordinance that contemplates a 50-50 sharing of sort of a base traffic calming system with 100% for any overruns for what are considered to be enhanced traffic calming measures. But this is to the council now. You've heard the public feedback and the public participation and all the various concerns, both pro and con. You have in front of you an agreement that you have every right to adopt this evening, but you also have some things to think about, because at the end of the day, this is a council decision and you have the right to heartily say yes. You have the right to say no. And you would even in fact, I believe I heard some speakers saying that you had asked previously, or there had been some discussion about going back, and notwithstanding that the HOA had made these affirmations on behalf of its community, that you still wanted to get certain percentages of the community to be in favor. You would have that authority as well, although I would respectfully suggest to you, we have a ordinance and a policy that contemplates that an HOA has the right to in fact speak. And we believe they are speaking appropriately, at least under the law in this case. Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you.
So,
Carol?
so let me net it out this way. We have the opportunity or the responsibility to either support the HOA or to overrule the HOA.
That is a fair characterization of it, yes.
Paul?
Ken, I think this is a question for you. I think there are two things before us with the agreement. One is the cost sharing, and the second part is the permission from the city to place these signs in the right of way. Am I correct on those two things?
Right. One of them, of course, is the approval of the money, cost share. The other is the permission to encroach. Now, that'll also be perfected by way of a permit, but we are also giving that authorization by way of the agreement.
Okay. So a follow-up question to that. Would you expect in that process that the signs would not have been erected prior to this evening's vote?
If they're on city right-of-way, if they're within city right-of-way, there needs to be city permission, or things are placed in city right-of-way. Forgive me.
Yeah, that's
my position.
Kind of where I would have thought we would have been as well. Sarah, I have a question. May I continue? Sarah, I have a question for you. A lot of the information that was presented this evening was regarding some of the speed studies that have done in the past. The most recent, I recall, being 2019. Is that correct?
Yes,
Has there been any speed studies since 2019?
there have not. No.
So after 2019, I think a couple of the residents this evening represented that there was a variety of meetings that took place, even as recently as 2021, where there was a discussion about additional measures. As a matter of fact, I think I even spoke at that meeting talking about the 3 E's of the city: education, enforcement, and engineering. I think at the request of the community, meaning White Columns community, we chose to engage the city for the enforcement part of that, and we elevated the police presence, I think, pretty significantly. The whole idea is to be consistently inconsistent, so you didn't know when they were going to be there. It wasn't going to be Tuesday mornings or, Friday afternoons. Do we have any information as a result of that elevated engagement by the Milton police as to the impact on the speeds?
We've not recounted those same locations from 2019 at this time. So
Do we know whether or not speeding tickets or warnings were given during that period of time from 2021 until now?
I don't have those exact numbers in front of me. I know some of the patrols were done at the multi-way stop intersection, and then I know there were some spot speed studies done or patrols run as well, but I don't have the details of the numbers of those.
And I just know anecdotally, there were a lot of tickets written or warnings given, including to a close friend of mine who was picking me up as a convenience one day. Didn't warn him that there might be police in the area. Probably good thing I didn't. He learned a lesson coming and going past the club. Wasn't it true that we were also doing a study about putting in some stop signs in some strategic places to have an impact on speeding as well?
We looked at those from a safety standpoint to see if they warranted limited site visibility, and there were 2 locations. We had a third-party engineer look at those to measure those distances and run evaluations based on the traveling speeds. And there were 2 locations that met the safety warrants for multi-way stops.
Have those signs have not been placed, have they?
They're in the process of getting installed.
We don't know what impact those might have on safety or speeds at this point because we've taken another action prior to the placement of those signs.
Correct.
Okay. I'd just like to make a comment too about the 67%, and I think some of the community has very eloquently pointed this out in the fact that there may have been a more recent interpretation of whether or not the 67% is needed. Not a recent interpretation, I guess an updating of our awareness of the HOA's authority versus the input from the community. And I lived in the community for 24 years. 21, I think, in the home that I'm in today, which is at the very end of White Columns Drive. So I'm one of those 28 homes that's beyond the 4th sign. I don't see a speeding problem on my end of the neighborhood. I chose to live down there on purpose because it's a quieter part of the street. But I do observe elevated speeds in other parts of the neighborhood as well. So I'm concerned too that speed is needing to be addressed. But what's interesting is historically, the city has chosen to stay out of, and I'm not directing this at you, Sarah, you happen to be standing at the podium, just a sort of general commentary for consumption. The city has chosen to stay out of the fight because it was clearly dividing the community. And that divide isn't over, as evidenced by the fact that we have a number of people assembled here this evening, some a minority this evening speaking in favor of, but a significant majority in speaking in opposition. And I've gotten the phone calls and the emails and the texts saying how upset everybody is about the process. So I own that as a part of the city. I own it as part of the community too. I think it's been wise historically to have stayed out of the fight. I think the past boards have said they're not convinced they could get 67%. That was a reasonable measure to say that there's a powerful groundswell to make a change. I don't think we've reached that threshold. I think the board certainly has acted within their authority and they're entitled to do that. I think it's a mistake. I think the signs are not in keeping with the spirit or the tenor or the price point of the neighborhood. As several people this evening said, they are much more industrial than I ever would have imagined. Do a comparison to the signs we have on Freemanville Road that are significantly less encroaching, significantly less impactful, but just as important. The city has determined that a significantly less engaging sign is also very effective. And yet we've chosen to go to this significant sign, great height, with multicolors flashing. I just think it's a significant overstepping of the requirement. I guess in wrapping my questions as much as comments, I would say, I think this is a significant mistake. I think we have a chance to correct it. I think that we should not necessarily at this point reward a HOA that may have overstepped their bounds with the timing of this and the fact that even though they're not required to secure the 67%, it's the smart thing to do. I don't think the city should engage in the fight. We should stand aside, let the community express its interests, conduct the vote, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Thank you. Sarah, quick question. I know you gave us the list of what these that we've approved over the years, I guess, was it 10 or 12? Has there ever been some where we've had discussion like this and any of them have ever been denied?
All of the past ones, the HOAs did act on behalf of the neighborhood. And so they followed the ordinance as it's set up. So the item that came before council for approval would have been the construction contract for the actual installation and purchase. So those all were approved when those came before.
All right, thank you. I just wasn't involved in any of the other ones. Wanted to double check. Carol, then Rick.
Thank you. So one of my least favorite things to do is to adjudicate anything regarding an HOA because you know more about your community and the details, many of which are probably not been shared tonight. It's a bit of a sticky wicket. And also, I appreciate leadership of HOAs. I really do. But if people aren't happy, it does call for perhaps the rollback to see what could make people happy. And there are 3 elements here. And I think that this might be the core of the process that you could roll back, whether residents acknowledge the issue, whether residents want action, and what action is agreeable. Because I don't think that you're going to get there, which is where you were, a very happy community with a great reputation, if this isn't fixed through a new process. So I would support that, but I want to make it clear that I also respect the leadership of the HOA and the fact that it is solution-oriented, because the flip side of that are many communities where the HOA doesn't do anything decisive and problems persist, and then there is a tragedy and it's, oh, why didn't you do something? So I would say if you go down this path to open process, that you act expediently and make firm decisions and then take responsibility for those decisions, because at some point, someday, something may happen. And there will be no finger pointing if everybody participates as quickly as possible. So that's my 2 cents.
Rick?
The signs installed before it even came before us. And I do know any type of traffic calming in a subdivision is always a concern. We've had this in our subdivision. I definitely understand the concern for speed and trying to regulate that, and you don't want to have an accident occur. But I've served on a couple of boards, HOA boards, and I know it's a thankless job. As a couple of you have actually served the longer terms. But I think it's important that you actually have community support. You may have the legal ability to actually enact this, but if it's something that's going to cause the citizens and the residents who live closest to it, they're against it. That doesn't seem like something you want to do to your neighborhood. Unless you've got some glaring error where there's been an accident, somebody's been hit, you need to act immediately, then maybe there would be a reason to enact something against the, I guess, majority or will of what the community wants. But I would think that you'd want to go back and actually, the signs, first of all, shouldn't have been installed until you actually notified the residents and you went through the proper channels with the city. But then make sure that you've got community support. And it doesn't sound like there's been that due diligence on this instance. It sounds like you've done it in the past, but it doesn't sound like you've really got majority support. We didn't have a lot of people out here saying we fully support it. I think what we've heard is the opposite. So that, I guess I'm coming down more on the side of saying, I think you want to have the community involved so you actually come up with a solution that most people can support. You may not get 100%, but to not really have a true representation from the people that live in that immediate community, I don't think that's a good way to move.
Ken, can you speak on the signs being installed?
Well, Mr. Mayor, that was in response to my question to Councilmember Moore, and hear me when I tell you that when it comes to the introduction of anything into city or county right-of-way for that matter, I'm going to want to ensure that there has been an approval by the government, however that is manifested. But I also don't want, there are various levels of improvement. What we're talking about here this evening is actual traffic calming devices placed literally within the traveling lanes. Is that not correct? Within the traveling lanes as well? But with respect to the signage, may I ask Ms. Sarah a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with respect to the signage that has been discussed, was that permitted by not by the council, but by staff?
Yes, it was.
So there has been indicia of permission given by staff with respect to that. This is a different sort of transaction than that. This involves both cost as well as installation within the right-of-way, correct? Within the traveling lanes?
This is within the right-of-way. So there's the difference in active and passive traffic calming. The passive is more of the educational component, like a sign would be. Active would be something physical in the travel lanes themselves,
right?
Like a speed table. So we looked at it as like we would a decorative sign. Lots of neighborhoods come in with permits to change all their signage to decorative. So they're putting a decorative fixture within the right-of-way. So it's a similar permit to what we would do for that sort of signage. Again, as it being a passive educational type of traffic calming, that was the approach that we took. And the agreement is to, again, the cost sharing and then the right of entry to continue to maintain it and to set the maintenance terms is what the agreement spelled out.
We did everything correct, is that?
With respect to those that have the already completed installations, that gives me a comfort level. I just was concerned about that as well as the conversation was unfolding.
So a follow-up to that. Let's say council says no. They have to remove the signs?
The signs that are already there,
Okay.
no, but this transaction we're talking about tonight does not go forward.
Okay.
But the signs themselves that have already been permitted would remain.
And they stay. Okay. Because kind of where I was coming along was I don't like overriding an HOA decision. They were voted in to, do whatever the citizens that voted them to do. So it always becomes difficult to override that, and it sets a precedent on us getting into these decisions. But I understand it's what's before us. Jan?
What's before you?
Sarah, were all four of the signs, did you approve the location for all four? And I just wonder about the fourth sign that came up about where that was located, where there was only 28 homes, and located on the opposite side of the sidewalk. It almost sounds like that was put in outside the right-of-way. How far was our right-of-way, I guess is the question to ask.
I've got the map here of the locations. So originally, we looked at 2 on Trayburn Manor and 2 on White Columns Drive. Once we did the stop sign warrants, one of the proposed locations became near what was going to be a multi-way stop. So it didn't make sense to have the 2 on Trayburn Manor anymore. So we looked at a third location on White Columns Drive, and the red arrows were the conceptual locations. And then once the signs got ready to be installed, the actual locations were determined, but these were the general, the 3 locations and the direction that they would point. And this was all coordinated with both the city and the HOA for visibility, for not too much visibility. So you do want to, as you're coming around a curve or a hill, to be able to, for the sign to catch your attention. So there's some logistics that go into the placement, but this was the This is the map of the 3 on White Columns Drive and the 1 on Trayburn Manor.
Paul?
Sarah, while you've got that map up, sorry. Help me with the orientation of the arrows. So the arrow was intended, if I'm on White Columns Drive going in, the first arrow that I see is near the pond. And it's facing as if you're going to leave White Columns. Is that the orientation that am I looking at the sign, or am I looking at the back of the sign with the orientation of the arrow? The reason I'm asking the question is that right now, all the signs on White Columns, the orientation to be able to read the sign is as you're coming into the neighborhood. There is no orientation of the signs as you're exiting the neighborhood. Was that the city's intention?
Yes, yes.
That they should all be oriented as we're coming in. So the map is incorrect.
Yes.
The outcome is correct. Okay. I would just point out an interesting fact. I think the only accidents we've had in the neighborhood are between the clubhouse and the exit of White Columns, or the entrance of White Columns. And they were accidents as people were leaving the community. So these have no effect on the accidents that have taken place historically. So thanks. Ken, I have another question for you. I just want to clarify your comment about whether the signs stay or go with our decision this evening.
Right.
I think I disagree with that. I just want to clarify my thinking compared to your thinking. So if this is an agreement for the use of the right-of-way and the access to the right-of-way, and then for the funding thereof,
right,
the signs, isn't this also a decision about whether the signs stay or go?
The city staff have been authorized to issue encroachment permits, and they have done so. The more important aspect of the agreement before you this evening is the cost share, is the financial aspect of it, particularly with respect to the city's match. And that is what is the primary issue this evening. To the extent that I misspoke earlier, that is my fault. There is a right of entry component of the agreement. I'm not taking that aback. There is, but I agree that city staff have the right to allow and permit encroachments in the right of way.
But prior to the vote of council, I think that's a vote that's in council's hands.
That's right. No, I think that's true, and that's not uncommon. Where I think the agreement covers a lot of area, but the focus of the agreement is the funding and
I get that.
So that was my mistake in my previous answer to you.
So here's the heartburn I have about that. It's no secret to anybody in this room, this is a long battle that's gone on in White Columns. This is not the first time White Columns in one way, shape, or form has been before the city in trying to address this issue of speeding. And historically, we have stayed out of the fight. This time we've chosen to engage. I don't know what the circumstances were that were different, that the city chose to engage. But I think we have a chance to correct our engagement if we charge the HOA with going back and doing some of these things that should have been done prior to this placement. Maybe it's turn the signs off for a period of time until the proper percentage of the community has given their support. Maybe they're removed for a period of time, or maybe they're removed in their entirety. But I think we've entered this fight, and I think that's a mistake. I think that the authority should be granted by council on something like this when we're talking about a right-of-way, especially when there's a contentious issue. I've already presented the fact that we have a couple of instances of things that the city has engaged in that were for the good of traffic calming, which is the engagement of Milton Police Force. We don't know truly the outcome of that because we haven't done a speed study since the elevated engagement of the city. We have not seen any impact from the placement of the stop signs. So I think short of those two things, I think we should be charging the HOA to, number one, go back and measure or take responsibility for measuring both of those impacts and see if it will have an impact on the speed overall. I'd be surprised if it didn't. And at that point, engage the community for the proper chance to have their voice. By doing it this way, you're basically saying that the HOA can run roughshod over a majority that has spoken this evening, and what I believe to be a majority in the neighborhood in opposition in the golf community. I think it'd be a misrepresentation of the voice of the people that we so solidly stand here for if we silence that, whatever the percentage is, I believe to be 67% or more, they're in opposition. I think we've silenced those voices tonight by going forward with a vote that says this is okay, either procedurally or that we've chosen to engage in a fight that we never should have engaged in the first place.
Paul, I'll just take one question. I don't think we engaged in the fight. I think just the HOA came to us.
Yeah.
Within their
We
legal
knowingly
authority.
participated in something that we know. I totally get it. It would be irresponsible for us not to be involved in assessing traffic calming measures for the safety of the community. That part I totally get. But to where we have historically said, go fight your own fight first and then come back with a majority, we didn't do that this time.
All I'm saying is this is very common within the city, and I don't.
It's not common.
We've approved, I don't know, 12 of them. So, Steve, and then Rick, or Rick. Well, Rick, go first.
Yeah, Sarah, if I could just ask you, has Public Works, did I understand that you actually have approved the locations for installation of 2 stop signs within the golf club community?
That's correct.
When do we
Yes.
plan to install those?
We're working with the HOA. They have the decorative signpost. So while we could have put up the standard metal post, we decided to wait and let them get the final placement and the decorative fixture to attach it to. And then we've ordered the stop bar material to put down on the pavement. So
Okay, so then you'll
I
do
think
the
it's-
breakaway
there was-
sign at that point, inside,
Yes.
breakaway pole inside. Have we as a city approved these type of like speed signs without a majority of people within where there's a HOA? Because it seems like with Fulton County and then also with, I know when we were trying to do it in our subdivision, I thought we had to have that majority threshold that we met. Did they bypass that because they had greater than 50% in the speed study exceeded the speed limit? Is that why they were able to go ahead without getting the percentage of approval within the community?
It was the review of the HOA covenant. So I've got the slide pulled up with the list of those past neighborhoods where we have installed. There's been 2 other neighborhoods that have done radar signs through the HOA acting on behalf of the neighborhood. One is Kennewick, that the city did contribute to that funding, and then Hopewell Plantation did some privately owned and installed radar signs that we did an indemnity agreement for that was recorded related to them being in the right of way. And then they had a right of way permit to install them.
So 2 radar signs and the rest are speed bumps.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
I guess this is new to me that we actually don't need majority. I guess I wasn't aware of that 50%, because in the past, it's always been, like Paul had said, usually you want the neighborhood to come to the agreement of what they majority rule want to actually go on in their community. Because I think when we were talking about doing it in Belterre, we were talking about the number of people on the street, higher X percentage of people in approving either speed humps or a sign or something else. I think that now this is kind of like a difficult position for the neighbors because there's signs up there, but they feel like that, at least what I'm hearing, they feel like they didn't have a voice in it, except for through their community association.
Steve, did you want to say something? Jan's going to say something.
I'll speak whenever the council determines
All
I
right.
should speak.
You can go. There you go.
So just to clear one thing up, if I could.
Yep.
Staff didn't wade into any issue going on between an HOA and its community. The ordinance is very clear on what role that staff plays in this. And when there was some concern or confusion as to what the HOA is empowered to do, of course, we brought that to legal counsel and we got that clarified. And staff acted appropriately throughout the entire process, including granting the right of entry into the right of way, which they do every day. It comes down to what the purpose of this is, and that's a cost share for the traffic calming devices and the ongoing maintenance. Not necessarily whether staff is weighing into an issue between an HOA and its community, which of course I am somewhat conflicted because in addition to the city manager, I'm also a resident of White Columns. But I do think it comes down to not necessarily whether or not they've met the threshold, because it's already been determined legally that they have. I think what the question before you today is whether or not the city council is going to contribute the 50% of the cost share, unless the council has decided it's going to, and it has the authority to now overrule the decision by staff on the entry into the right-of-way.
So just to clear everything up, no matter what council says tonight, the signs stay. Is that correct?
That's a Ken question. If you can overrule staff's right of entry.
I mean, that's because that's important, because even if council says no, I personally would have a hard time for the city uninstalling speed signs, given the data that was given to us. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on what the outcome is going to be if it's no.
Well, the code, and there is a process. The process has been followed. The process has culminated in this evening's discussion. But from the bigger picture, I mean, if you get right to it, the city, I'm reading from your ordinance, our ordinance, the city reserves the right to remove traffic calming devices for any reason, period. Upon approval of the city manager, the public works director may order the applicant to remove a traffic calming measure in accordance with subsection C, which I won't get into. So, I mean, again, I want to keep going back to the plenary authority of the council over its right of way. But I concur with your city manager that what's on the table today is primarily a funding construct.
Okay.
Reimbursement.
Dan?
Yeah. I kind of agree with Paul from the perspective that I think the city should stay out of and let the HOA do what they need to do. But I look at it from a different perspective, and that is, I think if the members of the community really don't want those signs, then when the next election occurs, you vote in people that want that and you pull the signs out. That lets the responsibility stay with the HOA. I'm just very uncomfortable, the city getting that involved when you really don't know all the people and you don't know everything that's going on there. And you got to trust that it always happens in these HOAs, because I've been on Crooked Creek's board. Nobody wants to be on the board. You have trouble getting people on the board. And then when there's a big issue, everybody blames the members of the board. This board did what they thought was right, whether it was or not, but they did what they thought was right. And if the majority of the members of the community don't feel that they did the right thing, they should vote them out and put in people that will do what the majority of the members want.
I agree, Jan. Paul?
Jan, with all due respect, we're talking about another contentious issue within the community, and that is, what are the board terms? We've already had some debate within our own community about the elected terms of this board. So, and the board's in control of that, and they've, without dragging you into the dirty, muddy waters of our neighborhood battles, just know that that won't work. Not making the right decision this evening and kicking the can down the road, I think would be an unfortunate decision on our part this evening. I think we have a responsibility to charge the HOA with going back and taking, number one, advantage of another speed study, seeing if the police impact made a difference. Number two, see if the stop signs make a difference. And at that point, if we still have a speeding problem, you bet they'll probably get the 67% that they need, because at that point, we have to do something different. I don't think we're there. I think we're not hearing the voice of the community this evening.
But Paul, just real quick, but I think what the issue is the signs are staying.
Not necessarily, not if the council, if the motion is made for the signs to be removed. I heard Ken say that we can override staff's decision.
That's in your code, that direct language is in your code. It's actually in the agreement.
I guess my only issue is, the HOA has the legal, and I know people on both sides of this.
But so
issue.
does council have legal authority.
Right. I just think we're treading very carefully when we get into HOA business and overriding their decision, which they were elected to represent their HOA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a tricky.
I was elected to represent the voice of the community, and I believe we are not representing the voice of the community by supporting the board's decision this evening.
Any other questions or discussion? That said, I'll open up for Carol.
I do. So can we vote on something else, which is intrusive?
Where are we going?
Who wants peanut butter jelly sandwiches?
Me. All right. Can we vote on? No, well, no. Look, we're nibbling around the edges here. And I am, with my colleagues, as I said at the beginning, I'm very uncomfortable adjudicating something with a minute's worth of knowledge, lots of history and some angst, et cetera. But can we, with the power of having the one side of the purse strings, can we ask for process? Can we ask for a survey process? Can that be our mandate so that we know that we can put this issue to bed on behalf of the citizens? I would imagine the HOA would like that monkey off of its back, and I would imagine the citizens would like that clarity. So can we, on behalf of our fiduciary responsibility, can we vote on that?
Under the strength of this agenda header, approval of an agreement between the city and White Columns for installation of 4 radar feedback signs. If the council believes that before it is prepared to vote on this agreement, that it wants that sort of additional process, I would be comfortable with that direction being given tonight, but I'm not going to go much further than that with respect to what this agenda header would allow.
Approve it or we deny it. That's just my opinion.
Well, I can offer maybe compromise, is that we think about if we were to pause, allow some of this other information to be measured, the impact of the police enforcement and the stop signs, that we not require that the signs be removed for the time being, but they be turned off. And if at such time that there is compelling information that says we still have a speeding problem and a 67% majority can be accomplished, then at that point, the signs are still in place, no cost incurred in removing them, but they're turned back on.
Paul, I will probably, the only thing I could grant would be a deferral for some delayed period of time, but the HOA's acted in their legal authority. They're asking us, so I think we approve it or we deny it.
But Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, I'll just ask that you give consideration to what our city attorney has suggested is within our authority, and it's within our authority to deny the placement.
And absolutely, and we can have that motion, and I think we're, Rick?
What I'm hearing is kind of a mix of different things. Like Carol said, we're kind of nipping around the outside.
Exactly.
I think that the problem we've got right now is the signs were approved, the signs were installed legally. What we have before us is more the issue is, are we going to fund the purchase of the signs? Are we going to enter into an agreement where we maintain? And Paul, what you were talking about was trying to go back and maybe before we approve or deny, maybe we do a deferral, have them come back after they've done, direct the community association or homeowners association to in fact do a survey, do more speed study. And Sarah's going to install the stop signs, but before we approve funding, without telling them that we're going to override and pull the signs out, may we defer this item or this portion of the item and say, we'll hear it again once you've gone back and actually gone to the community. That may also afford the ability of the community to work with their community or homeowners association to try to get this rectified and try to solve it internally. Because it sounds like we'd have to overrule what legally has gone through and to take the signs out. And that becomes a little bit, again, like Carol had said, if we don't have full representation, we're going on what we've heard. But I'm just a little troubled that they got installed, but I understand we did that within what our ordinance actually covers.
Quick question. If we go, say, to a deferral, the signs still stay.
Correct.
And they can still operate. It's just the cost sharing. Is that correct?
That's right, until further direction of either the city manager or, of course, again, the buck stops with the council. The council has the right to control your right-of-way. Curious idiosyncrasy of this process. So just can I play a hypothetical with you very quickly? So let's assume that you make that direction, that we go back to the HOA with a demand from the city of Milton that says, basically, before we talk about a cost share, et cetera, we want to see you engage the community and basically do some sort of a vote the way HOAs know how to do. And let's say they don't get 67%. Let's say they get 50.1%. Because the HOA has the authority to do this independent of that 67%, I'm just saying that is going to be food for thought for you all to say maybe 50% is enough then. You see, because we're not talking about bringing the petition now. That's got 67% requirement. We're talking about just a check the pulse of the community. I hope y'all are seeing the distinction I'm making. It's an informational point, but it's not legally dispositive of the issue.
But Counselor, it is informational to us in terms of the wishes of the community, and we are predisposed to want to validate the wishes of the majority.
I agree completely.
So I feel like you're minimizing that, but it's actually, I think, very powerful for at least us on.
And that was not my intent, Councilmember Cookley. The only thing I was pointing out to you was that information is important, but I'm just suggesting a 67% threshold is not the key to the kingdom in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I really try not to wade into that because we get into a lot of gray area.
But we also have something that has moved pretty far down the path. I mean, even this talking about turning them on, turning them off, that's not what.
Because the sign's already up. So even if we go down.
But I understand that, but they don't have to stay up. Okay, I mean, that there is a core issue here. They don't have to stay up. Signs are movable. Signs can be changed. I mean, we're talking about that too. There apparently is some sentiment that they're ugly and they're this and they're that. And whether you turn them on or whether you turn them off, that doesn't change ugly. We have core issues here that we're just kind of on the outer rim of this thing, which is.
I guess that's where my thoughts are. Before we approve the funding for this, the city side, and basically put our stamp of approval on it, there's obviously concern within the community. And I'd like to hear, like you had said too, Carol and Paul, you referenced it, get the data that tells us, go back, homeowner association, you're asking us to fund half of this, go back and actually do a little bit more thorough data, because it sounds like at least the folks that came up today are not in favor of what you've done as far as the sign. But we're not overriding and saying, let's go into a whole new area and we're going to take the signs out. Even though legally we could do that, I don't think we're ready to do that at this point. I think my suggestion is we do not approve this. We defer. We ask the homeowner association to go back and actually talk to the residents, and then they can bring the data back. That will also allow and afford the community to actually work within themselves to try to resolve some of these issues.
What's the funding really quick we're talking about?
$6,000.
Not a big number.
7,000.
The city's total contribution per the agreement this evening is $6,853.
Paul?
I think Rick makes some good points. I would rather err on the side of being conservative and do a little more fact finding than to make a bad decision this evening on not enough information. I think it would be completely appropriate to allow some of these additional measures to be considered with a deferral, and that we I really thought it was going to be more clear cut than this, but based on the arguments that I'm hearing and trying to make sure that we work with the best facts available, I could support a deferral provided there are charges to the HOA to go and participate in engaging the community, take a look at the stop sign impact, and take a look at the impact of the police enforcement.
So I guess the question is, what would be exactly what would be the charge that you would ask? I mean, the outcome of that. Because the signs are going to be up, they're going to be operational.
Yeah, I think we need to allow staff to finish their process of putting the signs up, or city, the stop signs. I think we need to go back and take a look. We charge I'm not sure who owns the responsibility, but we look at the number of tickets that were written and at what speeds, and whether there are warnings issued and at what speeds, and see if that's had an impact. And I think we should do a traffic study. I think we should do another speed study that says we do or don't have a speeding issue at this point. Whether the signs stay on or off, to me, I think that there's a truer measure of the speed study if the signs are off. But I think it would give us a false read. To be very fair and transparent, I think it would give us a false read at a lower speed if the signs stay active, because people are going to abide by we hope, abide by the signs. They're going to have the impact. So it's a false read if the signs stay on. I'll support either way, but I think, to be fair, the signs should be off, but I'll support either way. And then lastly, I think a community survey should be conducted, and I will leave it up for debate about whether it's 50% plus one. I think that's reasonable.
I just really think council shouldn't be getting into these waters. That's just my two
I agree.
cents on that.
I don't think we should be here.
I know people on both sides of this issue, and I just really think this is an HOA decision, and probably the Councilmember Jacobus's point of view. If they want the stop signs or they want the speed signs out, they should just elect a different board. I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
Well, there's much more history to that.
Yet, only, I guess, opposing or different view on that is if we do a deferral, we're just encouraging them to go back and actually talk within the community. We're not ripping out the signs, which I know that's what the will of many people here, they want to see them pulled out. We're not impacting that. So the question is, do we do the funding, and can we encourage them to do a little bit more due diligence? That's the only thing that I see by doing a deferral. We're offering, and that gives the community a chance to maybe do a little bit more input. I thought initially we were doing more than just and I think Paul probably thought that too, we were looking at more than just the funding of this. We were talking about whether the signs were going to be approved, but we've been told they already have been approved. And I don't think as a council we're ready to say, let's overrule what staff has already done. But at least on this one, we can send it back and say, do a little bit more communication within your community, and hopefully you find out really where people stand and take appropriate action internally.
Okay, no more discussion. I'll open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we defer. However, let me ask a question. Sarah, what's an appropriate amount of time to defer if we're going to ask that a speed study be conducted?
We would likely want to get that done. We try to do that during school, when school's in session. So we only have a few more weeks here in May. So at least 4 months to get us, if we aren't able to get them till August.
So you don't think it can be done in between now and the end of school?
We could get, yes, we could likely get at least
So if
2
we
locations
defer
counted.
for no less than 60, maybe 90 days, is that reasonable?
90 days, sounds good.
Okay. So I make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we defer this decision for 90 days to allow a couple different things to happen. Number one is a speed study. Number two, that the city have a chance to install the stop signs. Number three, that we capture information from the City of Milton Police Department on number of tickets written and at what speeds. And then number four, that the HOA conduct a community survey to see what the representation is, and but they achieve at least 50% plus one, be able to come back for an approval.
Do you have a second?
May I ask a question?
Yep.
So on your last part of that, then we're overruling the power of the HOA. We can keep that intact if the last part is just, it is our desired wish. Because if you make it mandatory, then we're trying to overrule the power of the HOA, and that doesn't work for me.
Okay, so I'll withdraw the last part.
But it is our express desire
Mhm.
that, because I think that's process is everything, right, folks? So if you will
so
say that, then I'm 100% on board with this.
Okay, so I'll amend the last part of my motion to say that we strongly encourage the HOA to conduct a survey and see what the representation of the community is for or against.
Right.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Moore and a second from Councilmember Morrig. No matter, I mean, like I said, I personally might not agree with what the HOA did, but I fully respect their charter and what they're charged to do with. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. What would you say, Dan? Favor. Says 5-2. Motion carries. We good? Are you clear, Steve, on what the
I am.
charge is? Okay.
Just if the council would like to consider, perhaps we want to change the language in the ordinance related to traffic calming, that would now make the decision as to whether or not to implement any of the traffic calming device, anything in the right of way, contingent upon the vote here, as opposed to separating that up.
Yeah, I guess my only 2 cents is the one thing that I guess I gauged tonight was city of putting traffic calming within the right of way without us approving it. I think everyone in this room thought we were approving that. So maybe that is something we can talk about in the next work session or so, if everyone's okay with that.
The right of entry, correct me if I'm wrong, both Sarah and Ken, is not only the initial installation, but also the ongoing maintenance, because normally we take over the maintenance. But in this situation, because they were different than our base model, I believe that the HOA was going to take over ongoing maintenance, and they would now have to continue to enter the right of way for that. But I understand where this body would come from, thinking that was part of it.
Right.
It makes sense. Perhaps we should change the language if you want to continue on even with this program.
Okay, that's good. So 90 days, is that, so can we have a count? Do we need to have a date on this, or you said 90 days?
90
correct?
days.
Okay.
It would be the next meeting after the 90-day period is
Yeah.
on.
Cool. All right, thank you. All right. We
Does
good?
does that language change the motion that I just recorded?
Yep, do you want me to repeat it, or?
No, I've got it.
Okay.
As long as that's good.
All right, just want to make sure. All right, we will move on. Sorry, we were shuffling stuff around, so. I think we're on to reports and presentations, number B, or I, or.
Mayor,
better
that's
be.
going to be reports and presentation. Item A, discussion on the allocation of Milton's American Rescue Plan Act funds. Our community deputy city manager, Stacy Inglis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This will be a repeat of pretty much what you heard in the council retreat, so bear with me. But we need to do this in the public, and I also need to get a little bit of feedback from you. So tonight, we're going to talk about we're going to discuss the components of ARPA and the final rule, and I would like to gain some feedback on allocation for eligible uses. And as I go through this, I'll bring up some of the discussion that we had in the council retreat. You had some questions for us, and I've gotten some of those answers for you. So I will try my best to get through all of that. So the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, was signed into law on March 11th, 2021. A part of ARPA is the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, or SLFRF, for the sake of having to not say SLFRF. I'm going to say ARPA, just because that's a lot easier to say. And now Matt Marietta owns me a Starbucks. He said, I think if you say SLFRF in the public, I will give you a Starbucks. So that's now two. It delivers $350 billion to state, local, and tribal governments across the country to support their response to and recovery from COVID-19 public health emergency. The program ensures that governments have resources needed to fight the pandemic and support families and businesses struggling with its public health and economic impacts, maintain vital public services even amid declines in revenues, and build a strong, resilient, and equitable recovery by making investments that support long-term growth and opportunity. So in May 2021, the U.S. Treasury published the interim final rule describing eligible and ineligible uses of funds. They sought feedback from the public on these program rules and began to distribute funds. They took into consideration the feedback they received and developed the final rule. And this guidance provided clarification and additional flexibility in eligible uses. And it was published on January 6th of this year, and it went into effect on April 1st. For Milton, we felt it was prudent to wait until the final rule was published because there was so much communication and changing rules and guidance throughout the whole process. We felt that it was just necessary to wait until final rule. Once that final rule came about, then we would bring forward some eligible or recommended eligible uses for the funds. And as you'll see later in this presentation, it was actually worthy. And we're very happy that we waited until the final rule was published because it provided additional flexibility for us and was more beneficial for our citizens. So the funding is sent in two tranches. We received the first half last July, and the second half is scheduled for delivery this summer. And they divided it up into two different types of governments and based on how they calculated the funds. Metropolitan cities were populations higher than 50,000, and that was all of our sister cities in North Fulton except Mountain Park. They received the monies directly from the U.S. Department of Treasury, and the calculation, though, is a little different from what our calculation was. They calculated it using the modified CDBG formula. CDBG is Community Development Block Grant, and there's a specific formula that kind of goes along with that. Non-entitlement units, or NEUs, is what we are considered because our population is less than 50,000. We receive the funds indirectly from the state. So the state received the funds from the federal government. The state had to then distribute the funds to us. And our funding is based on simple per capita calculation. The eligible expenses cover the period occurring on or after March 3rd, 2021, all except for premium pay. Premium pay is retroactive back to the beginning of the pandemic, January 2020. So on this next slide, you'll see our distribution based on, again, NEU, we have a population less than 50,000. And the other sister cities had their calculation based on that CDBG formula. So you can see how it actually benefited the citizens of Milton. We're scheduled to receive nearly $14.8 million in all of this. The timeline, as I mentioned, first half was received last year, and the second half is scheduled to be received this year. Expenditures must be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and they must be fully expended by December 31st, 2026. And there are 4 key eligible use categories, and they are ordered from broadest and most flexible to the most specific. So public sector revenues is providing government services up to the amount of revenue lost due to the pandemic. Key eligible use category number 2 is public health and economic response, and this is responding to COVID-19's public health impact along with its economic harms. Number 3 is premium pay for essential workers, offering additional support to workers who bear the greatest health risks because of their service in critical sectors. And number 4 is investments in water and sewer broadband infrastructure. And this is providing funding to critical water and sewer projects along with high-speed broadband infrastructure. Pardon me, pollen is killing me. So we're going to dive into each one of these categories and then discuss potential eligible uses afterward. And as we go through the presentation, I will also outline the differences between the interim final rule and the final rule and address the questions that you brought up during the council retreat. So the first category is replacing lost public sector revenues. The key change, this is key for us in Milton, is in the final rule regarding this category is that it allows for now a standard allowance option. There are two options of replacing lost public sector revenue. The standard allowance option is up to $10 million can be used to replace lost revenue. And this is an amount that is available immediately to the citizens of Milton. And these funds can be used for general government services that are traditionally provided by us. The other option is calculating revenue loss each year using the Treasury's, it's a counterfactual growth trend that can be applied to revenues that we receive, and it is available after each calendar year. So you have to wait until that calendar year comes about, actual revenues are calculated, compared with the counterfactual growth trend, and that actually ends up not working well for the city of Milton, and I'll show you later on. So we're going to recommend that the standard allowance is the recommended way of using these funds. And any revenue loss, replacement of revenue loss public sector revenues is subject to streamlined reporting and compliance requirements. So it's a little easier to report. This next category is very, very broad. It deals with responding to public health and negative economic impacts. And there are several subcategories under this particular category, for lack of better words. Responding to the public health emergency is one category, and I'll go through each one of these in detail. Responding to the negative economic impacts, of which there are several assistance programs that are organized by type of beneficiary. Restoring, and you can see all of the assistance programs, and then restoring and bolstering public sector capacity. And in general, to identify eligible uses of funds in this category, recipients should identify a COVID-19 public health or economic impact on an individual or class, and design a program that responds to that impact. And responses should be related and reasonably proportional to the harm identified and reasonably designed to benefit those impacted. And the final rule provides a broader set of eligible uses for impacted and disproportionately impacted populations, and clarify that reasonably proportional capital expenditures may be allowable. And just a note, impacted populations means the general population that experienced broad-based impacts of the pandemic, and disproportionately impacted community is the section of population that face meaningfully more severe impacts, often due to pre-existing disparities. So think qualified census tract and low income. For this presentation, I'm actually going to discuss just the ones that are highlighted here in red because they are most relevant to the city. I know that we went through all of these categories in the retreat, but after receiving feedback from you, I think I'm going to focus on the ones that we had questions on and go through those. Responding to public health emergency. Treasury has identified several public health impacts and enumerated uses of funds to respond to impacted populations. COVID-19 mitigation and prevention, there are enumerated eligible uses include a long list, but the ones that are most applicable to Milton can be vaccination programs, testing programs, equipment and sites, COVID-19 prevention and treatment equipment, such as ventilators and ambulances, medical and PPE protective supplies. And then medical expenses includes paid family and medical leave for public employees to enable compliance with COVID-19 public health precautions. So the next subcategory is responding to the negative economic impacts, in which I'm going to discuss first the assistance to small businesses. So as mentioned previously, there are several assistance categories identified, and just focus on small businesses and nonprofits. And as I go through each one of them, I'll discuss the council questions that came up during the retreat. Under assistance to small businesses, to be eligible for assistance, the small business must have experienced negative economic impacts, like the ones identified on the slide you see there. They should have no more than 500 employees and are a small business concern as defined in Section 3 of Small Business Act, which includes, among other requirements, that the business is independently owned and operated and is not dominant in its field of operation. And type of assistance allowable in the final rule are loans or grants
to mitigate any financial hardship they experience, or technical assistance, counseling, or other services that support business planning. And during the council retreat, a question came about whether or not we can refund occupational taxes that were paid during the pandemic. And while it's possible to do this in the form of a grant, I wanted to mention that occupational taxes are based primarily on gross receipts for most of our businesses. There are some that do it based on a flat fee and number of employees, but most of the businesses do paid based on gross receipts. And any revenue loss that a business experienced would reflect in the fees they paid in the city in the subsequent year. So, for instance, for 2022, the fees were based on the gross receipts they received in 2021. In 2021, it was based on gross receipts in 2020, and so on. And so they for any gross receipts that they had or any losses they experienced, it does reflect in the fees that they were paid in the next fiscal or in the next calendar year. And I was a little curious to see how businesses have fared through the pandemic. And so we pulled a very, very small sampling of different businesses throughout the city and compared them year over year from 2019 to 2022. And I look at the year prior to the pandemic. As I mentioned, 2019 fees were based on 2018 gross receipts. And in a small sample, all had either paid significantly higher fees in 2022 versus their fees in 2019, which would show a growth in their business or very much a recovery in the business. There was one that was a little bit below what they paid in 2019, so they're still recovering. And overall, we have collected more occupational taxes in 2022 than we ever have in the past. I think we're over 900,000. I think it was 917,000 just in this part of the fiscal year, so we haven't even gotten through the rest of the fiscal year. Last year, we collected, I think it was 803,000 or 826. I can't remember. I think it was, I'm not asking you to look at it. I think it's 803,000 we collected last year, 826,000 we collected in the previous year. And then prior to that, it was a little bit less than 826. So I just wanted to point out that we have recovered well, I think, as businesses. I know that there are several businesses that did suffer through the pandemic. If that's something that you would like for us to explore, I just wanted to be mindful and let you know that we would need some additional resources in order to assess that, come up with criteria, and administer the program. I'm currently not going to recommend any allocation of the funds based on this, but again, if this is something that council wants to do, we can certainly provide any support and get through that program. So assistance to nonprofits is for those nonprofits that experience negative economic impacts or disproportionate impacts of the pandemic and meet the definition of nonprofit, specifically those that are 501c3 or 501c19 and tax-exempt organizations. Impact to nonprofits can be identified as having decreased revenues, facing financial insecurity, experienced increased costs, and have challenges covering payroll, rent or mortgage, and other operating costs. In the council retreat, a question came up about whether the nonprofit had to be located within the city limits. And so I reached out to our auditor under the contract that we have with them to help us administer these funds. And it is their opinion that there isn't a residency requirement for nonprofits, and would argue that supporting a nonprofit that serves our city is allowable under the regional initiatives focus that is mentioned in the guidance. But as a small business assistance, additional resources would be required to administer this program. So we're currently not proposing using ARPA funds for this category. But if it's something that the council would like to do, we can certainly come back with something for you. So the next subcategory under number 2 is responding to the public health and, number 2 is responding to public health and negative economic impacts. And that next subcategory is restoring and bolstering public sector capacity, which supports government's ability to deliver critical COVID-19 services. There are 3 main categories of eligible uses, which include public safety, public health, and human services staff, government employment and rehiring public sector staff, and effective service delivery. I'll get to the third point in just a minute. Under public safety, public health, and human services staff, ARPA funding may be used for payroll and cover benefits for eligible employees, and police and fire are considered eligible under this. We would need to assess the portion of time they've spent on COVID-19 response, and that portion of time can then be applied to their payroll and related benefits. The next category focuses on government employment and rehiring public sector staff. Fortunately, Milton did not lay off any of our workers due to the pandemic. However, the final rule allows for uses that support and retain public sector workers. So for Milton, a potential eligible use could be worker retention incentives, including reasonable increases in compensation to persuade employees to remain with the city as compared to other employment options. Another eligible use could be covering administrative costs associated with administering hiring, supporting, and hiring support and retention programs. The third category is improving the efficacy of service delivery through tools like program evaluation, data and outreach, as well as address administrative needs caused or exacerbated by the pandemic. And eligible uses include what you see here on the screen. The third category is premium pay. And the funds that may be used to provide premium pay to eligible workers performing essential work during the pandemic. This focuses on offering additional support to those who have and will bear the greatest health risks because of their service. It may be awarded up to $13 per hour, and it may not exceed $25,000 for any single worker. And that's not within a calendar year, that's throughout this whole program. And then, as I mentioned, payments, this is the one category that payments can extend beyond that May 3rd, 2021 date. These payments could be retroactive from the beginning of the pandemic. Premium pay, recipients should undergo the following steps to provide premium pay to eligible workers. Step 1 is identify an eligible worker. Emergency responders and local government workforce is among the list of 25 considered to be key economic sectors. Number 2 is verify that work performs essential work, and that is work that is not performed while teleworking from a residence and involves either regular in-person interactions with patients, the public, or coworkers of the individual that is performing the work, or regular physical handling of items that were handled by or are to be handled by patients, the public, coworkers of the individual that is performing the work. And step 3 is confirm that premium pay responds to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 pandemic. No written justification is required if the eligible worker meets one of these requirements. The first is they are earning at or below 150% of the residing state or county's average annual wage, including premium pay, as determined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I said statistics. Such a difficult word. Occupational, employment, and wage statistics, whichever is higher. For Milton, this would be $88,650 for our area. That is the cap that we're looking at. Or the worker is not exempt from the FLSA overtime provisions, meaning that they can earn overtime. So premium pay may be awarded in installments or lump sums, that is monthly, quarterly, or et cetera. It may be awarded to hourly, part-time, or salaried or non-hourly workers. The last category is the least flexible, and it deals with investment in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. The final rule broadens eligible broadband infrastructure investments to address challenges with broadband access, affordability, and reliability, and to add additional eligible water and sewer infrastructure investments, including a broader range of lead remediation and stormwater management projects. Eligible projects under the water and sewer infrastructure aligns with eligible projects under EPA's Clean Water State Revolving Fund, of which the management and treatment of stormwater or subsurface drainage water and reuse or recycling of wastewaters, stormwater, or subsurface drained water. Sorry, I'm having to read all this. There are also other eligible projects that align under the EPA's Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. And the one type that is most specific to Milton is the green infrastructure, including green roofs, rainwater harvesting, and permeable pavement projects. The final rule does allow for additional eligible projects such as culvert repair, resizing, and removal, replacement of stormwater sewers, and additional types of stormwater infrastructure. And these projects would need to be deemed necessary, and there are criteria provided on how to do that within the final rule. So the second part of this category is investment in broadband infrastructure. And these type projects are focused on serving locations without access to reliable wireline broadband service. Treasury encourages recipients to prioritize investments in fiber optic infrastructure wherever feasible on projects that will achieve last mile connections. Further, Treasury encourages recipients to prioritize support for broadband networks owned, operated by, or affiliated with local governments. So during the council retreat, there was some discussion around whether ARPA funds may be used for funding or partially funding the connection between a resident who had a long driveway into the right-of-way, the fiber that may be in the right-of-way, because that goes along with our initiative to encourage large lots throughout the city. I asked the auditor, and they felt that this use would actually be a stretch because there is broadband available. It's just that connection. However, she did say that if we wanted to, we can use funds, general funds for that if we wanted to do something like that, but not ARPA funds specifically. It would not be an eligible use. While there's a lot of flexibility throughout the 4 key eligible use categories, there are some restrictions that do apply. We cannot offset a reduction in net tax revenue, meaning that we can't lower our taxes and assume that we can make up that lost revenue with ARPA funds. We are also not allowed to make any deposits to a pension fund, payments on debt service, replenishment of financial reserves, or satisfy settlements and judgments. Additional general restrictions are funds cannot be used for a project that conflicts with or contravenes the purpose of the ARPA statute, meaning you cannot use the funds to undermine the COVID-19 mitigation practices in line with CDC guidance and recommendations. So this next section identifies potential uses within the 4 key eligible use categories. And first up is the replacement of lost revenues. And we are recommending using the standard $10 million allowance because the counterfactual calculation would actually result in either a negative $4.1 million that we have to give back or about $4 million by the end of this thing. And as mentioned, using the counterfactual calculation would draw out the amount of time that we can actually use the funds. They're not immediately available. And this would help expedite any other the build out of an active park along with the funds that we have already budgeted for building out an active park. If you add $10 million to it, we can do this without going out for a bond and going into debt service. We're going into debt. So if we use the $10 million, we'll have $4.7, almost $4.8 million remaining balance. The next category is responding to the public health emergency. And all of the items that you see on this list qualify under the eligible use, for this category. And all of them are either budgeted or have already been spent within that time frame after March 3rd, 2020-21, with the exception of desktop scanners. But if we use the funds to pay back the city or to take care of the allocation and budget that we already have, we can reallocate the monies that we already have budgeted elsewhere to, again, expedite some other projects that we might want to expedite for the strategic plan or comp plan. That total is $776,000, and remaining balance will be about $4 million. And I'll sum it all up in just a minute, and I'll ask for your feedback. But please, if you have any questions right now, I'll be happy to answer them. So within this same category of responding to a public health emergency, under the subcategory of restoring and bolstering public sector capacity, we can use the funds to cover payroll and cover benefits for the portion of eligible staff time spent on the COVID-19 response. Calculating this out, assuming a 25% of the staff's or the public safety time spent was on COVID-19 response, that equates to about $100,000 per pay period. Over a year, that would be about $2.6 million. The next category is premium pay. We survey the surrounding jurisdictions to get an understanding of what they are doing in this category, and you can see the results here. I want to mention that Cherokee County and Johns Creek distributed hazard pay to their employees, which came from the general fund, and no ARPA funds were used, but we did want to include that information in the survey because they did do something for their employees. During the council retreat, you were very supportive of providing premium pay to our team members that were exposed to COVID due to the nature of their work. You favored the Cherokee County policy that differentiated between levels of exposure. So the recommendation you see on this slide is modeled after their program with that tiered approach. And the criteria would need to be fleshed out into a policy and would include input from our department heads. But our thoughts are that the pay would cover the period in which our facilities were closed to the public. So that would be March of 2020 to March of 2021, so a period of 1 year. We opened them up back to the public in March of 2021 because that was when the vaccination or the vaccine was readily available to our citizens and to the staff. So that would be when the mitigation of COVID-19 and spread of COVID-19 was starting to get a handle within the public. It would be prorated for the number of months an individual worked in person and would be for employees whose salary is equal to or less than that 150% of our area's overall average wage, as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the $88,650 that you see on the screen. If we do the $500 per month for sworn police and fire that meet those qualifications that are listed below, and $250 per month for civilians, it would be a max of $560,000. We would obviously have to go in and dive deeper. This was not a back of the napkin calculation. It was a lot more in depth than that. But what I looked at and what I could see without having to dive in through each person's timesheet whenever they said that they were teleworking or when they were in the office, this is the figures that I can come up with. I know that there was some discussion in the council retreat about creating a greater difference between those with the significant elevated risk versus those that didn't have as great of a risk as our public safety employees. If you wanted to do something like 500 or 200, the total max cost would be around $544,000. So just wanted to mention that, and I can move on and let me finish through the rest of this presentation. Oh, I'm sorry.
Casey, can you draw that comparison again, please? If we did
500 for sworn and 200 for civilians. The max amount,
540
that maximum would be 544.
versus what generates the 560?
500 and 250.
Okay, thank you.
So if we did the 560, as is on the screen, the remaining balance would be about $3.4 million. And the next eligible use category is investment in water and sewer infrastructure. And you can see several projects there that are either budgeted or in the pipe coming down the pike of needing to be budgeted. I believe FMCC hydrology is one of those that isn't fully funded. But the total amount on this screen would be almost $2.4 million, leaving a remaining balance of a little over $1 million. So in summary, most of these funds are either replenishing, the $2 million are replenishing, either budgeted or have been spent. Premium pay is obviously not one of those. And then stormwater infrastructure, a good bit of that is already budgeted or has been spent, and we could redirect those. And that's the reason why we have the buckets that are on the screen. So monies that we already have budgeted, if you put money to cover these projects that have already been budgeted, we can reallocate those budgeted funds to another project, hence the water coming out of that bucket into the next one.
You go back to the stormwater infrastructure. Just one question. Are we looking at doing anything on Bethany Bend where we've got the flooding every time it rains? And the reason I ask is that's been a known issue, and you can go out there, you can see where the dirt is, but every time it rains hard, that is a hazardous thing because it's a low point and it floods 3/4 of the way across both lanes, which makes it dangerous because I see people swerving around it every time.
Yeah, that would classify as one of the stormwater management type of categories that would fit under this. And the line item, the $240,000 on this sheet that shows other planned projects, That one wasn't specifically called out in that list, but we were hoping to bid a big group of stormwater projects to
Okay.
generate some interest, and it could definitely fit within that category
Okay.
as a
I
eligible
appreciate
project.
that. Thanks.
So we're recommending the remaining balance, that $1 million remaining balance after we take into account all of the other categories, is using it for public safety payroll. But I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any directions you want to provide on other assistance programs or anything like that.
Cool. Great presentation. Questions for
thank you.
Stacy? Everybody, Rick?
Yeah, it was very thorough. And I'll just ask this for the public record. Have we vetted the rules and the bill to make sure that there's no current or future federal government strings attached to the use of these funds?
Yes.
Okay, so we're confident we don't have an issue there. Other question is, we had talked one time about using some of the funds possibly for charitable organizations that serve Milton and other areas. So did we look at any of that, like where we have food insecurity, stuff that we know exists within our community? It's not, I guess, that public. Have we looked at using any of those funds, or did we just allocate them all just for the city projects?
That is direction that we need from the council. That is one of the key eligible use categories, is assistance to nonprofits. If you wanted us to look into that, additional resources would be needed. And we asked the question of whether or not they had to be located within the city limits. They do not, as long as they serve the residents of the city of Milton. So if the council would like to have us look into something like that, we would have to put together maybe a bid to get some additional resources, or look into what other jurisdictions are doing. But right now, we are not recommending that. But again, if the council wants to do so, we'll be happy to.
Okay, so essentially what we've got right now isn't recommending doing anything for like North Fulton Community Charities or Meals by Grace, any of those type of organizations. We're not going to do anything as outlined right now. That's the current proposal.
It's up to the council.
You're right, Councilmember Morgan. It's not part of the current proposal. If the council would like us to look into that more, I think what Stacy's stating is that we would probably have to bring on additional resources. We don't have the internal capacity to be able to manage grants and things along those lines.
So it would have to be by grant is what you, I don't think we want to get into loans. I know Fulton County did that last time. They didn't do loans, but I think they did grants to charitable organizations when they just had the funds initially.
Well, would it take additional resources just to find out what other cities are doing if they are looking at non-for-profits?
We can do a survey. We would have to, we could reach out to them, and we could reach out specifically to our
So the
partners.
reference to additional resources would be if we were going to create a grant program to accommodate that, an application by one of those charities that Rick is talking about.
Councilmember Moore, I've had a few governments that have done this, and it is a bit of a staff endeavor because you've got to you have to have sort of an application process, a vetting process, an approval process, an accountability process, and even maybe an audit process. So it's a bit of work. It can be done. I've seen it done, but I'm just suggesting that I think correct. It's a bit of a bureaucratic grind.
Yeah, the reason I was asking to clarify is there a way to streamline that where you don't have to go to that
How did
heavy a
Fulton County
process?
do it?
And I don't know, we don't need to explore that.
There may be opportunities we might be able just to bootstrap onto somebody else that's already doing it and emulate their forms and their protocol, but that would just be.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, because I know in talking to Bob Ellis, during the actual year when COVID was going on, Fulton County did it seemed like they almost did like declaration and said, okay, we're going to give X amount of $100,000 to this organization.
They were giving out party favors.
What's that?
I think they were giving out party favors without speaking frank. I don't think they had a designated process like that. I think we would have to do as far as, it's difficult to pick and choose,
right?
Who gets what. And I think I remember that process. They were just
Yes,
Anyone
I'm
else?
wondering how they were able to do
Yeah.
that, but yet, were the rules different at that time for what they did versus?
And that wasn't ARPA too. That was something else. That was
Probably CARES Act.
That was the
funding.
CARES Act.
CARES Act,
Probably
okay.
CARES Act funding. I will tell you that I think that and I'm not going to suggest the crisis is over. I'm not suggesting, but as it is abated, I think that there has been a more measured response to how to use some of these federal dollars than when it was right in the thick of it. And we were just saying, we got to get money out to as many constituencies.
Okay. It sounds like it'd be more complicated than not, but are we making the final decision tonight or?
No, yeah,
Okay.
this will come back before you. You still have additional input that you can give during the budget amendment process
Okay,
and during the FY23 budget process, because obviously we will not be able to spend all of these monies within fiscal year 2022. So it'll have to be reallocated in 2023. So you have a couple bites of the apple there.
We all have to be in general agreement that this is a
I would like
relatively pretty good
some
path.
sort of direction, yes.
Can we go to the premium pay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of that. Oh, you're asking to review it again. I was going to say I support the higher pay amounts.
I was wondering if, you said do 500 and then 200 would be the alternative. Could we just take the 1 to 200 and add it to the 500? So in other words, my concern is that the police and the fire department, they were in the thick of it more than anybody, I think. And to me, I think giving them a larger share is the right thing to do. I mean, so I would like to see that 500 changed to like 600 and rearrange the dollars. And then the civilians would go to 200.
Okay.
Or you
It
mean
would
like
change the
150?
amount a good bit, but I can do those calculations and bring that back before you during the budget amendment.
Jan, so are you saying increase?
I'm saying
fire?
increase police and fire by 100 and decrease the civilian by 50.
this is
Oh,
a
by
month,
50,
this
so
is a
net
monthly
of
amount.
50.
It'd be a net
Got it.
increase of 50.
Is the council on board with that?
Sure.
Yeah.
No problem with
Okay. I'll bring you those numbers back.
And how soon can we do that for them? I mean, I know a lot of this has to wait, but to me, the premium pay is something that if we can move more quickly on it than other areas, is that possible?
Looking over at Steve, we want to make sure, I mean, if you're on agreement, we can do that before the budget amendment, which we'll be bringing before you in June. We can certainly look at that. It depends on how quickly we can get the policy written and vetted by our department heads. And obviously, it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of look into the payroll and make sure that we're distributing it appropriately to the people that were not teleworking at the time. So it's going to take a little bit of time.
Stacey,
But
might we be able to get the public safety out first?
absolutely.
Because there's less.
That's the easiest.
There's less research we have to do to be able to apply those. So from a public safety perspective, we'd probably be able to move quicker on the public safety.
That'd be great.
I've got some of the documents.
We can make that a priority. I've heard that from the council both tonight and at the retreat, so we'll move on that.
Paul?
Just a quick clarification, the eligibility for that, there may have been some staff or public safety personnel changes since that time. Are you required to be on the payroll today to be eligible?
That's what I recommend.
I agree with that.
We did go through recently where there was the grant, the public safety grant that was provided by the governor, where it depended, it didn't matter if they were still on our payroll or not. So, tracking down former employees and making sure we had their proper information was a little more, on the resources than we thought initially. But yes, if I would recommend that we only do current active employees who worked during that time.
Great, thank you.
If I could just go back to the grants before for the not-for-profits, it's not a matter of us not wanting to do it. I used to be in my old job. We used to be the pass-through of federal dollars, and we would be the grantor. And the amount of work required with that is significant. And don't know everything that has to be done with this if we were going to pass through money. But being on the other end of that audit, which I was every year, is a huge undertaking.
Fair enough. Council good?
Good.
All right. Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you.
Hey, Tammy, if you please stay on the next item.
Mayor, that next item is discussion of name for the city's 137-acre passive and active park property at 1785 Dinsmore Road in Milton. Our Communications Director, Mr. Greg Botello.
Good one. Okay. Well, I heard Stacy said FMCC. Hopefully you'll never have to hear that again soon, unless you really want to. Sorry, I don't mean to make judgment. You could call it the FMCC Park.
Was it one of the choices?
Well, it wasn't one of your nominations, so hey, you get the. Okay, so we're here once again. I hope, I think as many of you as possible were able to explore this awesome property that is managed by my friend Tom. It's a really unique place. It's kind of, I want to say that, I've called it the crown jewel or gem of our green space purchases, but it's really more than that because it's unique because it's active and passive. So so the challenge though is that it doesn't have, I want to say former Milton Country Club is a name, but we're trying to get it so it's to get something that really resonates with something that sticks and it lives on with people for a while and really speaks to the community. And we've created the process for this, which the cool thing and the fun thing and the creative thing and also the challenging thing is that we've had lots of great ideas. So again, our goal was, the mission is to give it a name that resonates with the visitors while reflecting the city's values and identity. So we had kind of, I was before you went, I think in March, say what our goals and objective. We want to create an efficient, effective process that allows for citizens and stakeholder input. And I'm going to go into this later, but the response was amazing, too amazing almost. But to build energy and excitement and value for this unique and treasured city property, I think if you actually went out there, you saw the people here, anyone talks about it, they love it. So I think that was a success so far. To provide council with a viable, legitimate contenders to name this space. So we provided you with a lot of names. I'll go into that, the challenge of that. And then the last part is to select a name that makes sense. So I'm going to just explain a little bit of the process, where we came from here. So I'm not going to go through all this sort of thing, but we had Facebook posts, we had email solicitations, things like that, and other ways we got people, the public to buy in. We reached out to stakeholders as well. As you all know, you had an internal survey that kind of went out to hopefully trying to narrow this down. What ended up happening is that the council was similar to what the public was, is that you had many great ideas. If there was one name that stood out above all else, I would say we would just kind of vote on that name. There wasn't. That makes it challenging. And I don't want us to bang our heads against the wall too much. I know you guys want, I want this to be the council's decision, but I also want to make a process that will get us to the finish line, because we could be doing this a year or two from now and still be in the same place, which is all fun, but still. So the idea, I'm going to walk you through my proposed process with Tom's support too, and explain where we kind of think we might lead to this. So the ideal is by mid-May, we'll have a name that that's a name that's acceptable to you all, that is official. So again, I'm going to talk about a little bit of the public feedback. So we had 211 names submitted by people. One of the challenges and one of the great things is that very few of them were the same names. There are lots of one-offs and great creative names. You'll see this word cloud sort of thing. We did have a few names that, and I think the council took this hard, a few terms that kind of stood out. Milton was represented about more than half. Park was the next kind of most common one. Preserve, Valley, you can kind of read on down there. So there were a few terms that stood out, but in terms of the combinations, they took all different forms. To that point, I just wanted to I'm not going to read all these, but there are some really cool names. So, and the cool thing is that all these names that you're here, like the people emailed, I went through every email, responded to every email, and even the comments. But there's a lot of thought, like the Milton sticks. Whatever gentleman who sent me that really put a lot of thought in these things, and all these kind of Kit Fox. I think Tom wrote of that there's a lot of foxes around, and there was a lot. There's really kind of creative people in our community. I really want to just kind of publicly thank them for every single one of these ideas was worth considering, and every single one was fun to read through, even if it makes it more challenging to pick one. So the next process. After this, we share this with you all. It said, okay, what names of those would you like to consider? I was hoping that everyone would come back with one name, and that would have been all very simple. But we have instead 7 names. I think, am I counting right? Yes. And that were proposed by the mayor and council. And kind of one of the feedback from one of the people is, up on the lectern there is that rather than, if we can just narrow these down to 4 or 5, or even if we have, whether we have 3, whether we have 7, names that you all would be comfortable with. And I have a little process here. I'm going to kind of walk you through how I would propose this. And from there, if we ask you this and everyone has the same one name, then that's the name. We'll see if that happens. But then if not, we're say if we can have names that you're comfortable with and people that someone stands up for, then we can have a public poll that's starting as soon as tomorrow, or at least Wednesday or so. So I'm going to ask for all these names. I'm just going to go one by one. If there is one person up there who says, yes, I want this name on the ballot, then that name will be on the ballot. If there's not, then it won't be. That's just my proposal. I'm open to other ideas, but I feel like it's a succinct way. So if you don't mind, are everyone fine with that process? Okay.
Go for it.
Yep, raise your hand. This is alphabetical order, as you can see. Milton Acres, Parks and Rec. Anyone want?
Yep. Sorry.
Can we see this?
Can we see the name list again?
Oh, it's not there. It went away. I'm looking at it.
So we are voting on if we want it on the final.
Yes.
Or just on
Yes.
the ballot.
And
Unless we all agree
I'm
on
comfortable
one
with
name.
all.
unless you all agree on the one name, which is
Not really
yeah, no, it's not a vote. It's a
survey. It's a survey.
It's a survey. It is.
How'd I get you, Paul? How'd I get you, Paul?
We're just talking amongst friends. And if you raise your hands, then
Survey says.
So the first one, and if you can see them, this is alphabetical order. Milton Acres, Parks and Rec. Is there someone who really wants that on there,
Really wants it on
or wants it at anyway?
No, go on.
Okay, that's Andrea. So that is on the contenders. I think I know the answer to this one. Milton Central Park and Preserve. We get that is on there too. Milton City Park and Preserve. We have a few of those, so that is on there as well. And hopefully someone's taking notes. Actually, well, is Carol here?
No.
Milton Meadows was suggested by her.
Is that what she said?
Yeah, that was hers.
That's what she said.
He would
so.
vote for that. Yep.
I think she would.
Yep.
Yes, so you're proxies, but you're just Milton Preserve and Recreation Center.
Kind of like that.
No.
I didn't see any.
I'm scared.
Okay, well, that's
tonight,
good.
man.
Congratulations on the limiting one. So the second last one is Milton Valley Park.
Is it a valley?
It is a good question. I asked our city engineer that. Half of the property, 50 to 60 acres, is considered a valley. I mean, it's not a valley like Sonoma Valley or Napa Valley.
Right. That's
But
what I
it is-
think of valley. I'm
So,
like,
and
Milton is not a valley.
This is not, that was one of the more commonly, but for obvious reasons, but yeah, so.
Greg, isn't that one on there because that was the community chose?
That was yes, that was of the contenders, that was probably the highest one, but it was, when we're talking the highest, it's like.
I'll vote for that.
Okay, that works.
Jesus.
So the idea is that if that was the name, you'd be okay with it. Hopefully that's the, and the last one is Woods of Milton Community Center. Anyone? Okay.
So what are the ones?
So let's see, Tom's gonna back check me. Milton Acres, Parks and Rec, Milton Central Park and Preserve, Milton City Park and Preserve, Milton Meadows, and Milton Valley Park. So those are 5 names. So we will create a online survey, which is kind of IP address protected, I guess, in the sense that you can only vote from the same device once. Whether, it's going to do the best we can. We actually tend to get some good responses.
No writing candidates, right? We're not gonna get one of those.
No, I hope not. So, and then I think just basically we'll give them like 10 days and we'll see what happens. We have signs that we can put out at the park to kind of, if you're happening to be going by there and they can give us, we'll tell them not to put it in the Facebook comments because it won't count, even though it did count before. But I'm hoping that it can be the former Milton Country Club very soon. because that's not one of the
Was that
contenders.
one of them?
No, it's not. It's, you could, we had some creative uses of FMCC from some people on staff, but those did not rise to the floor. So
Good. It's a great way to engage the community and let them choose the name.
exactly, and as long as you're acceptable, it's a good partnership, and we'll see what happens. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Oh, wait, here, sorry. This is the this is the last up. After this is settled, we'll move on to the next one, which I believe either Cox Road or the Mayfield Park over there. So
Or probably Mayfield.
probably Mayfield, yes, but eventually it is though. We'll name them all eventually.
Mayfield Park it is.
The lake one.
You call it a lake. Some people call it a pond, but it's a lake.
The one right here.
Yeah, the one that's you can walk to it. So,
Not the joint part.
Not the joint park.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, so we have no items under first presentation or public hearing, so we'll move on to the zoning agenda. Will the city clerk please read the zoning rules and sound the first item?
Mayor, that first item is consideration of RZ 2201, text amendment to Article 19, Crabapple Form-Based Code, Article 6.1, definitions to define outdoor auditorium. It's agenda item number 22148. Can I read really quick, just for protocol, the short zoning rules?
Is there any public comment here? Or if we don't have public comment, do we need to read it, Ken?
There's no requirement to read them. I think I would survey the gallery to make sure there's no one.
Do we have anybody here to speak on this? Okay, no.
Could we, forgive me for
No,
not
go.
knowing this.
Yeah,
Is there anyone
absolutely.
who wants to speak? I don't even know. Okay,
No.
forgive me.
Miss Robin McDonald.
The most interesting material for last. So tonight, as Tammy, our wonderful city clerk,
Thank you.
sounded for our two different, two text amendments that are basically the same definition out of Crabapple and Deerfield form-based codes. So our objective tonight is to consider a specific definition for the term outdoor auditorium for both Crabapple and Deerfield form-based codes. A little bit of background, although this use is listed in both the Crabapple and Deerfield form-based code specific function and use table, there are no definitions either in the form-based codes or the general definitions section of the zoning ordinance. There is a need to provide a definition tailored for the city of Milton as it will impact the proposed updated administrative permit for event special indoor-outdoor, currently in the zoning ordinance that will be moved to Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs sometime in the near future. Just going over what has happened thus far, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the following definition at its March 23rd meeting. Outdoor auditorium means any privately owned property improved with an outdoor permanent structure used for outdoor entertainment and intended to be used for the gathering of people for public or private assembly. At the Planning Commission meeting, they expressed concern that outdoor auditoriums are allowed by right or warrant, T2, within T2 by warrant, within the Crabapple and Deerfield form-based codes. It was suggested that outdoor auditoriums only be allowed by use permit, which would be a public hearing process through various meetings, including Planning Commission and City Council, in all transit zones within Crabapple and Deerfield. I just wanted to show you currently where outdoor auditorium is permitted. As you can see in the highlighted area, a warrant in T2 and the rest of them by right through T3 to T5, with the exception of T4R, which is basically a placeholder for existing zoning from Fulton County. And then Deerfield, also by warrant, and then by right T3 through T6. You all heard this at the last work session on April 18th. And based upon the input, you all agreed with the opinion of the Planning Commission that outdoor auditoriums only be allowed by use permit. After discussions, Staff proposed the following definitions, which would require the outdoor auditorium to be located on a civic space and not just placed arbitrarily within the form-based codes. So the proposed edit, which would add on to what the Planning Commission recommended, is right here. So what we propose and has been reviewed by the city attorney was the outdoor auditorium shall be located on a civic space as required by 3.6.2A of this article. This is specific to Crabapple. Sites of more than 4 acres and not located within an infill regulating plan shall dedicate at least 5% of their total area to civic space. So meaning that, Mr. Jones can't just take 5 acres out there on Deerfield and then create an outdoor auditorium. It needs to be specifically associated with a development and the minimum requirement of the civic space, and it be developed within that area.
Robin, can you define what civic space, what we mean by that? I mean, is it still privately held? What determines civic space, the use or the term?
There is a
civic space?
specific definition of civic space. I would need to look it up to get back to you, or unless Stacy looks like she's ready to to assist me.
I can tell you it is privately held. And the
Yes.
civic space is the result, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, of the space that is required as a result of the percentage in the form-based code. And as of right now, we only have one, and it's across the street, correct?
I mean, there are other civic spaces that are being developed, or for instance, we have a subdivision coming in over on Crabapple that they're required to do civic space. It's not as large as the one across the street or the one that's at the lake on Mayfield, but they are privately held, but they need to be open to the public with what would be normal park hours.
So does that mean that, for instance, the outdoor arena behind us, that civic space, then the owner, even though it's privately held, does not have control over hours and what happens on that? Because I know you may have gotten calls too. I got some calls saying, how does that impact our ability to restrict or act that?
I met with the owners of this one, and I've spoken to Ken since. They are entirely, they own their civic space. They can determine the hours. They can determine what goes on there, as long as it doesn't violate city code. They can restrict who goes there. They have authority in that regard. Where it becomes civic space, and again, Ken, please jump in and correct me where I falter here, is they can't entirely close it off to the public. What is generally considered is it's a public gathering space. This one just so happens to have an amphitheater in it, but you see it in other places in and around the country. If you think about Manhattan, some of those greens that you see in and around the city. And they're really, and Savannah is actually another great example. Good. Where you see these gathering places. So you can't entirely close it off. You can, in theory, you couldn't fence it off and entirely exclude the use, but it still is completely under the ownership of whatever private entity owns it.
They could also control, like you said, the hours and use, that type of thing.
They can. The city can't. Some of the conversations I had were some of the ideas that they were thinking about using it for. And, they were worried about separation of church and state, things along those lines. And none of that plays a role here.
Okay. And it's not technically a park per se that the city dictates. It's still privately held.
It falls within the same regulations as any other private property.
Okay.
So it should, other than being able to fence it off and exclude everybody from it, it doesn't impede their ability to use their property as they'd like to. Am I okay?
I think that's fine. It's the difference between something that is generally accessible, but the private entity has the right to dedicate it to its own unique purpose for a time. Reverts back to being generally open.
Stacy, is there any benefit to reading the definition beyond that discussion? I'll tell you why I'm asking. I'm asking because if we are trying to make sure that there is a civic space,
What is that?
what does it look like? If it's pretend it's a 5-acre property, could they do 3 feet wide and it's the entire perimeter of the property and they've met the parameters of the acreage commitment, but not necessarily the spirit of the intent of civic space?
I think that's a zoning question, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to interject. There are certain qualifications for a civic space. There's different types of civic spaces. They can be as small as a playground, but they go as large as a regular park, and there's different ones in between. And they, all of them require to be fronted or front on a street, so there can be access by the public if, so that's part of it. So there's various requirements that are made in the code about a civic space. It can't just be, you know, a little bit of acreage way in the back where nobody can access it.
So it does restrict that, or it does restrict the definition I just gave, or it could be 3 feet wide for the perimeter. And
Correct, correct.
Okay. It has to be assembled as such that the community actually can use it.
Correct.
It's
But there's
not-
different levels of it.
Yeah.
So,
The minimum I'm seeing, at least from what Stacy's scrolling through, is 60 feet in width.
Okay.
yeah, a 60-foot square. Or 60 foot each way, so. Yeah.
And Robin, would it be fair to say, can you put the definition? Yeah, would it be fair to say that every outdoor auditorium as used in this must be on a civic space, but all civic spaces don't necessarily have an outdoor auditorium on them?
Correct, yes. That's just a requirement to do an outdoor auditorium. They can't just put it anywhere. It would have to be part of the civic space, so.
And it will be by permit.
I'm sorry, what?
And it would be by permit, so it would still.
Exactly. You're asking us to go back and create a use permit for this use. So we'll go and do that as well. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So there is a little bit of difference between Crabapple and Deerfield. And Crabapple, there's just one requirement for any sites of more than 4 acres is 5%. But when you go to Deerfield, it will have the same definition, but it'll refer to 2 sections of the civic spaces. A, sites of more than 4 acres and not located within an infill regulating plan shall dedicate at least 5%. And then following up that sites of more than 8 acres, shall provide at least 10%. So that's a little bit different than Crabapple, where it's just one requirement versus in Deerfield. As you get larger, the idea is there's going to probably be larger parcels that could be developed, and we would ask for more percentage of a civic space. So but otherwise it remains proposed to be the same. Are there questions on that part?
Just, you haven't addressed the use permit yet, and if you're going to, I'll hold my question.
Correct. We haven't began that process yet.
Okay, so a quick question about use permit. So use permit typically is for perpetuity, it goes with the property. Could we, in a case like this, have the opportunity to measure at the change of ownership? Or are use permits just not touchable that way?
They're touchable, and so I don't want to mislead the council, of course. A use permit can be removed. It has to be removed in Zoning Procedures Act compliance. In other words, we'd have to run legal ads and take away the use permit. What I think my better answer would be is that tethering it to some sort of a change in ownership puts almost an unbearable burden on staff to try to keep up with that. We don't know when these uses go in and out of different ownership. Once we've approved it, we just sort of, we don't keep up with it anymore. No one does, I'm aware of. So that's the administrative difficulty in that, I think.
Yeah. The reason I ask that is you assume everything is going to be in the spirit of Milton and it's always going to be used to the best and highest use and it's for the good of the community, but heaven forbid there's something that's not. The guy decides, hey, it's too much of a hassle, I'm just going to flip it. If it's going to continue in an operation that would still be unacceptable for whatever the reasons might be, you wouldn't have a chance to revisit it. Where if you did have a sunset on it at the change of ownership, you might have a chance to weigh in. However, and to defend where you may be going is if it is an egregious use, you probably have a chance to weigh in based on other code.
That's right. Not only that, but I think that if we did in fact have a real problematic issue with this future, given that it's typically not, it's not a huge moneymaker. I mean, it's not like a restaurant or an industry or an office building. I think our flexibility to repeal the use permit may be a little more robust than in
Okay.
something we have to look at it when it comes up.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion?
One question on individual use or uses that they can do with that. Do they still have to get like a special events permit if they're going to do like a concert or something like that? Or is that automatically unlimited and approved once we approve it as an outdoor arena?
That'll be back before you shortly. That's the new special event permit, which is what this is teeing it up for. And depending on the impact, there is a 2 to 3 prong test that will determine whether or not something requires a special event permit. The proposal is that that amphitheaters or civic spaces,
Outdoor auditoriums.
outdoor auditoriums, eventually I get there.
You're leading me down the path.
They deal with this 10 hours a day. They'll I believe they're scheduled or they're proposed for 12 events per year. But most events that you see generally out here don't rise to the level of requiring a special event permit. An example of some things that we'd be used to seeing out here that would rise to that level is probably the St. Patrick's Day event. They had a big public safety event out here, something along those lines, but most of the events out here would not require it. It would have to have a significant impact on the community, the roads, public safety, things along those lines. I'm paraphrasing.
Everybody again? Okay. Are you done with the presentation, Robin?
I think you guys got it. I just gave example of how it would be calculated. Developer A has a development in Crabapple contains 6 acres, times 5% is 13,068 square feet, which is approximately about 1/4 of an acre, a little less. And then again, on a larger piece, 12 acres times 10%, that's easy math, 1.2 acres of that development would have to be set aside for civic space. So that's just demonstrating, how you calculate that civic space. And then we just have the map there, but since we're going to propose doing a use permit for all transect zones, it's kind of immaterial at this point. But with that, I'm done. Unless you
Great.
guys have any other questions. And then we'll just have to make voting on each individual RZ 22-01 and RZ 22-02 because they're 2 different parts of the
Yes.
the zoning ordinance.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll open up for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I propose that we approve agenda item number 22-148.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Moore with a second from Councilmember Moore to approve agenda item number 22-148. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. And I'll open it I guess we probably need to read it. Yep.
Yes, if you don't mind, Mayor, I'd like
Sure.
to read that for the record. It's consideration of RZ 22-02, text amendment to Article 20, Deerfield Form-Based Code, Article 6.1, definitions to define outdoor auditorium. Agenda item number 22-149, Mayor.
And I'll waive public comment unless anyone is here that wants to speak on this. Okay, so I will close the public hearing and open it for a motion.
Motion. Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we approve agenda item number 22-149.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Jacobus and a second from Councilmember Moore. He's beating y'all. All
Let's give that to him.
in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's unanimous.
And forgive me, Mr. Mayor, this is my fault.
Yeah.
We did approve 22-148 as well.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's see, we're no items under unfinished business. We already did new business. So we will go on to mayor and council reports. Any councilman report? Paul?
Just two quick comments. First, if my remarks earlier this evening were interpreted to be disparaging of staff in any way, I would like to apologize for that. That was not my intent. So I'd like to make sure if I offended anybody, I apologize. Number two is I had the pleasure this week of being up in Jasper, Georgia, and had business with the new fire chief, Chief Tim Prather. And he could not have sung higher praises on our Milton fire chief, Chief Von Moose, who's not here. He was here earlier this evening. I was hoping I could say this when he was here. One of the Tim Prather took me into his office, and it was with great pride that he showed me an award that he had received from our chief on his retirement from when he was chief in Cherokee County. It was a short-lived retirement. It was about 3 weeks before he stepped back into his hometown, where he's now the new fire chief for Jasper, Georgia. But I couldn't have taken more pride in the fact that our city did something forward and outreaching to acknowledge Chief Prather's accomplishments under his time as Cherokee County chief of fire. And now look forward to celebrating him in his role in Jasper, Georgia. Our own chief made us very proud.
Thank you.
As usual.
Yes, he does. All right, anything else?
I'll just give a quick feedback on the community center, not the former Milton Country Club community center. I think we just had our first rented event this past weekend, and I just want to commend Tom and staff for helping the person who actually did that. And I think it was well received. I had heard a lot of positive comments on that space, to the point that people are saying, we think we want to do events, and I think it's going to queue more up. So it was perfect setting, perfect weather on a Saturday night. But I just want to thank staff for all the work that they did, and then also assisting one of the residents who actually rented it.
Great. All right, Sarah?
Dropping like flies.
All right, good evening again. Missed the month of March, but I'm going to jump into the April statistics for Public Works. And we've had 18 service requests. That's requests for work orders that come from outside the Public Works Department. Generated 104 work orders, and 78 of those were completed. Some of that gap is that we've been doing inspection of our stormwater infrastructure. So as we're finding certain structures that need cleaning, those are just created work orders that we'll get around to when some of the other potholes and more urgent requests slow down. Our seasonal roadside mowing started in April. Ashford Gardeners is our contractor that provides that once a month, April through October. Our quarterly gravel road maintenance was completed in April, and our quarterly street sweeping of curbs along major roads was also completed, collected 12 cubic yards of debris. I also wanted to point out that we're working on a programmed maintenance effort with our right-of-way general maintenance contractor, where we're going to look where there's gaps between our street sweeping services and our roadside mowing to get some of those areas that aren't exactly identified in those scopes. So for instance, there's places where debris builds up on the edge of catch basins and the street sweeper just doesn't quite reach far enough. So efforts to clean up those areas, as well as places where grass grows in some of these concrete islands or in sidewalks. So we're working with our general right-of-way maintenance contractor on those types of concerns. And then last on this picture is a new member of our Public Works fleet. It's a F550 dump truck. It's going to replace the need for rental equipment and help with both winter weather with the snowplow and spreader, and also some of our routine debris collection, and will support our gravel road maintenance.
You bought yourself a dually.
My take-home vehicle.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Okay, then a few project updates. On the April 25th meeting, the contract was approved for the Crabapple Road streetscape design. So we're going to be kicking off the survey to collect all the existing conditions while we finalize the concept of what we're going to do on Crabapple Road. That's going to be the signalized pedestrian crossing, some medians and planters, and just some streetscape improvements. So we're excited to get that one going, and we're going to kick off the design consultant this week. The equestrian parking, Birmingham Park, and the Freemanville Birmingham Green Space, we got bids back, so we're working on a contract for the construction of those parking areas. And lastly, on project updates is Hopewell at Bethany. These pictures are from the construction. The top picture, you can almost start to see the circular roadway forming with the grading that's been done. And the bottom picture has lots of utility work kind of all going on together. We've got the power truck working on power lines. We have a lot of gas line relocation out there, and water line as well. So lots of underground work going, and can really start to see the intersection forming now. We presented a contract for approval on April 11th that was two different sections of New Providence Road. One was a asphalt path and the other was a drainage improvement. So just wanted to bring this up that work is starting. They've got the barrels out, done just some minor clearing along that shoulder, but it's going to connect the two sections of the Woodwinds development where there's a nice 8-foot asphalt path, and it's going to install a path that same width along the Gladwine frontage. And lastly, wanted to talk a little bit about the former Milton Country Club. One thing I'd brought up during the early stages of construction was the cart path removal. And you all may not remember, one thing we did with that is to stockpile the old concrete pieces, crush them, and they're actually the bottom 2 inches of the new surface trail. That trail is a total of, it's got the 2 inches of the crushed concrete and then another 6 inches of base and then 2 inches of topping. So now that we are in the closeout part of the trail construction and the cart path removal, we're going to be ready to proceed with abandoning those cart path easements now that everything's removed and stabilized. So that'll be moving forward. And finally, just some pictures of the trail. I feel like it turned out really well, and look forward to the community getting to use those. And that's all I have tonight.
Looks great.
Thanks,
I
Sarah.
think it's great
Thanks.
that you reuse the concrete instead of us buying new material. That's great.
All right, Greg?
I feel like Sarah leaders, you can hear me twice, so lucky you. Let's see which ones. Nope, my thing just went away. Let's see if this is mine. Oh,
Just you.
nope, that's the wrong one. And I'm not going to talk. I'm going to do a little bit different this time, mostly because while I can talk fast, I think you'd rather hear from my colleagues, which you hear from here. I'll introduce you to them in a second, but generally our metrics that if you've seen us, our engagement is great. Everything's all kind of full systems go. Just for an example, in the past, maybe we do 2 or 3, I call them full package when you do email, news release, Facebook, Twitter. Maybe we do 2 or 3 a month. We've done the last 8 days, we've had something along those lines, and every one of those is relevant. Part of it is the 2 of them were council previews. Whenever people have to vote, I want the public to know about that and end up in their inbox rather than have to search around the website. And it should be 9 tomorrow if we can get the FMCC naming survey out. So we're just ramping it up, keeping it busy, and that's not even going to talk what my colleagues here will talk about all the stuff they're doing. We also try to be interactive. I think we use our social media in different ways. I'm not sure if you saw, for example, our nature photography contest where people left their photos in the comments. We had great response. We are also increasing outreach to HOAs now. When it's irrelevant at all, we're including the HOA lists on our communications, which did not used to be the case. You can see also that we're coordinating on the Veterans Memorial Day coordination. You can see the ad that was in the Herald, Gotta Go Retreat. And there's a lot of in-person is also part of it. So while we're not running these events, even though per se, we are very much involved with everything that pretty much every department does. And especially lately, it's been our Parks and Rec Department, who's been great to work with. A few things I'm just going to touch on before I hand off. The National Community Survey, that's going well. Or about, I think we have about a 15-something% response rate for the official survey. But what's customary for these things is that they eventually, you have an open survey that anyone can take. Not quite as useful, but it's another data point. So that is now out. Been involved in creating core values champions. That's more of an internal thing to get people energized within the city staff. So we have an internal role there. There's a bunch of other things here. I'm not going to talk on all of these things, but I know that, but every single department we've been working with, and I know Jen's going to talk a little bit more about fire department things, and we've done some for police department, things like that. But there's a lot more I could talk about, but I will spare you since I'm the last speaker. And better yet, introduce you to my colleague is Jen Hartwig, who's going to say a few words.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You might not recognize me without a camera in front of my face. But I'm Jen Hartwig, the city's communications coordinator, and my main responsibilities are multimedia communications. So that includes photography, video, building and managing the website. And I've also been spearheading some big web-based projects for our department, including creating a single page for all meetings and transparency dashboards for the 2021-2025 strategic plan. So working alongside our city clerk, Tammy Lowett, we now have all meetings with their agendas and other documents in one location on the website. All city council, board, and committee meetings are listed by date with agenda, packet, and minutes available in PDF and HTML format, as well as a link to that meeting's YouTube video. This iframe or inline frame is an HTML element that loads another HTML page. In this case, we're using Municode within the web page. So essentially, it puts another web page on our website. And the reason we do this is because though the program is external to our website, it looks like it's internal, so people don't have to go to an external website. We're also working with Municode to have a portal, to create a portal for all this information. The portal will have a robust search function and an integrated meeting screen, and will be even more mobile friendly. About 50% of the visitors to our website do so using a mobile device. So a portal that is completely mobile friendly and snaps to the size of a photo screen is very important. So that's what it looks like on the website. So everything is listed by date, and you can scroll down. You can also search by the type of meeting, and you'll have everything on there. Once we finished the strategic plan in 2021, the next goal was communicating to the public where we were on meeting those goals. When assigned the task of figuring out the best way to do that, Assistant City Manager Bernadette Harville and I landed on ClearGov, our transparency portal. We built a dashboard for each strategic plan priority and goal, 14 in all. And there we share the objectives and action plans to reach each goal, as well as the progress on each action plan supporting those objectives. This is a living document that we will update regularly.
With 200.
Well, 14 dashboards with 200 individual elements that need to be updated regularly.
Can you go back to that again? Can you go back to that last slide?
Absolutely.
And so each one of those will have numerous.
Yeah, so if you look on the right, those are the individual dashboards. And if you click on each one, what will show up is on the left. And that has each action plan listed.
All right.
And the objectives and where we are in meeting those.
Great.
Dashboard is one of the strategic plan goals. And then within there is each objective and the action plans and sub-action plans beneath each objective.
And the results to date.
Working as diligently as we can to get that up to date each day. But we're also looking, ClearGov is working on a strategic plan specific platform that would be part of a package we already have. So hopefully that would be a little bit easier for Jen and I to keep track of going forward. And we're hoping that that'll be easier than the dashboards. But for now, that's what we have been able to do.
Once you're current, how often do you think it'll be updated?
As often as the city manager advises us that he'd like to accept it, that could be monthly, quarterly, whatever.
We're planning on every 30 days right now.
Okay, fantastic.
I've also been working with the fire department to increase their social media presence. We started an Instagram account and we're working to gain followers. We hope our new cooking series, Cooking with Fire, will help, where we'll showcase some of our fire chefs who all agree that having a good meal can make a bad day better. We're also filming Building in Milton, where we'll share the progress of construction on Station 41.
Oh, great.
Nice.
Among other projects that we're working on, but we're having a lot of fun doing these things. So finally, I'd like to thank city leadership for the opportunity to attend some really exciting training this past month. 2 weeks ago, I attended Managing Public Information for All Hazards Incidents at the Center for Domestic Preparedness, a FEMA facility in Anniston, Alabama. At this course, I trained alongside other public information officers and emergency responders from around the country, working to better plan for and respond to an emergency. We learned practical knowledge for the role of public information officer, about the National Incident Management System, emergency communication methods, risk communication, and message development and delivery. Best part is this training was 100% funded by FEMA. So nothing came from any of our pockets. I also attended the annual Government Social Media Conference in Dallas, learning alongside other government social media professionals with seminars from major social media networks and other industry leaders. And finally, while I was in Hilton Head enjoying spring break, I took the less than 1 hour ride to Savannah to attend the City County Communications Marketing Association Regional Conference.
That's a big.
It's called 3CMA. That's the normal name, but City County Communications. And I was able to learn some great information about graphic design quick tips, hence some of those cool graphics, and the role of video in government communications. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions y'all may have. Okay. Next up will be Anita.
Ready for your TikTok videos.
You know, I'm hoping one of our interns this summer might help us with that. We do have a plan.
Let's get ready. She's going to help me with electronic voting. So that's coming.
That is coming.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm happy to share a few updates with you all regarding economic engagement and development. As you know, I transitioned into this role in late November after working as a city special event coordinator for the past 2.5 years. The last 5 months have confirmed that I've found a path that aligns with me both personally and professionally, and I've enjoyed taking on these new challenges and developing new initiatives. I'm going to start by showing this photo. What better way to showcase a thriving business community and the recent growth in Milton than this photo? Since just January of 2022, I've coordinated 10 grand opening ceremonies with business owners throughout the city, and I'm grateful to have had your support at many of these important occasions. These grand openings have taken place in Crabapple, Birmingham Crossroads, and Deerfield, including a wide range of business concepts showing the unique offerings of the community. And what's important to state is that a ribbon cutting is so much more than just a photo op. It truly marks the beginning of a relationship that's built on respect, appreciation, and support. I've made it a priority to connect with new businesses as well as existing businesses to establish a strong foundation and a relationship that we can continue to build upon moving forward. Before scheduling a grand opening, I make sure to visit with the business owners prior, familiarize myself with their space, their staff, and their mission. I believe that really helps make it more impactful and valuable, and I've heard nothing but good feedback from these business owners that are getting to take the time to connect with elected officials, city leadership, and staff. Here, I'd like to recap a few of the larger projects that I have underway. As you know, the rewrite of the special events ordinance is in progress. Hopefully, you should have this in front of you soon for a final vote. I know tonight's approval of the outdoor auditorium definition definitely sets us up in a good place for that. We believe the updated language will provide clarity for external applicants, provide a smoother workflow for internal departments, and support special events that are beneficial to creating a sense of place within our community. In March, I was fortunate to be able to attend the Georgia Academy for Economic Development. This training covered topics about community development, economic development, and leadership. The facilitators there shared helpful statewide resources, and that program created space for local and regional networking opportunities. I found the program to be extremely fruitful and was able to create wonderful new relationships with other academic development partners throughout the state. With professional development as a high priority for me, I'm also currently participating in the city's LeaderGov Emerging Leaders program. Through this program and from the guidance of my mentor, I am better able to identify my leadership style and approach and apply it to everyday interactions in the community. I am also seeking my Georgia Economic Development certification and will be beginning that program in the fall. I have begun working alongside community development to partner on Milton's placemaking campaign. These efforts coincide with the priorities in the strategic plan and the comprehensive plan. A big focus of this project includes wayfinding, identifying the entry points into Milton, and working to ensure that Deerfield is connected in a thoughtful, inclusive way, along with each of the character areas throughout Milton. And along with these various projects and initiatives taking place, I'm planning this fall's Crabapple Fest that is set to take place on Saturday, October 1st. Applications went live on April 26th. Last year was our biggest, most widely attended festival yet, and I have high hopes for the same level of energy and enthusiasm this year as well. We all know that once strong connections are made, they will have a ripple effect in the community. So my role in economic engagement is to work as a liaison, not only between the business community and Milton residents, but also with community partners and stakeholders. Establishing a strong relationship in North Fulton specifically allows us to leverage the strength of the region. Working with Jenny Doyle and her team to co-host the 3000 Forum was an opportunity to bring together real estate professionals with local developers and city officials to promote an open dialogue. I recently toured and established a connection with Tech Alpharetta so that Milton can remain strong in the conversations regarding the technology corridor between Alpharetta and Forsyth County. I'm also working alongside my North Fulton partners on BizNow efforts that's set to take place later in August to bring real estate professionals and developers together to share updates with the North Fulton community. And I have received valuable support from the Greater North Fulton Chamber of Commerce, as well as my counterparts in Alpharetta, Roswell, Sandy Springs, and Johns Creek. I'm working very closely with team members in Alpharetta and Roswell to help bring my vision of a green business network to life. I'm very excited about this. We are working to create a unified approach to support agriculture in North Fulton and prioritize agritourism in our community. So more to come on this soon, but hopefully as we're steadily working together to find ways we can benefit our communities collectively. Further, the partnerships with Georgia Power and Fulton County have been very important to keep Milton informed of the economic development landscape from a broader perspective. And last, but certainly not least, I've been working closely with the Milton Arts Council to foster new connections and come up with creative ways to engage the arts within the Milton community through the creation of events, performances, and competitions to reach residents of all ages. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Good stuff. Milton Business Council tomorrow night, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
5:30.
5:30.
That's right. Anybody have any questions for Anita? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colin, you made it, man. You just, great job. Great job.
Mayor, can I say one thing? We have to recognize we have a special person watching tonight.
Absolutely.
Our old city clerk, Sudie Gordon, is watching us all right now. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to her and a quick wave. I couldn't let tonight go by without mentioning her.
Cool. All right. Well, awesome. I will keep it, or I guess I'll open for motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, have a motion from Councilmember Moore, second from Councilmember Morg to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Peyton, can I have you sign?